People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Travellers arriving into the UK have been told to expect disruption as Border Force workers begin strikes.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Friday the 23rd of December. This is Breakfast on GB News with myself, Martin Daubney, and of course Rosie Wright. And here are the top stories this morning.
Millions of people are being warned travel delays again today. Border Force staff begin 8 days of strike action over pay. Now they join a group of people on strike. Postal workers will also walk out today, and national rail strikes resume from tomorrow evening.
Makes you wonder who isn't striking. Anyway, Minister have threatened to veto Nicola Sturgeon's gender law after the SNP passed a bill that allows trans people to self-declare their gender.
Also, we've got the latest on a GB News People's poll. We asked voters what they think about the plan to move asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing and why the public thinks nothing in Britain works anymore.
And on what is traditionally the busiest shopping day of the year, we're live in Melton Mowbray, where many customers will be doing their last-minute Christmas shopping.
Now, as ever, you can join in any of the discussions. Border Force striking staff, maybe. Are you ready for Christmas, Martin?
I'm not. I'm a lastminute.com lad, I'm afraid. I'll be shopping right until the cusp on Christmas Eve.
GBViews at gbnews.uk to join the conversation. So welcome to the programme. I have a small confession to make.
What?
It's my last day at GB News and my last breakfast.
And I'm actually really, really happy and privileged to be alongside you.
Well, Martin, thank you so much. It has been a real pleasure. Unfortunately, strike action is our top story again. It has been all day this week, so we'll keep you up to form today. And if you are arriving in the UK, maybe you've got friends and family who are visiting you, well, they're being warned to expect delays. Passport control workers are beginning strikes over pay and working conditions. The Border Force staff are the latest set of UK workers to go on strike, and is what is arguably one of the busiest times of the year.
It is. And over 1,000 workers are set to walk out, affecting passport control desks at Birmingham, Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Cardiff and Glasgow airports, and also the port of New Haven. Elsewhere, postal workers are set to stage a walkout again today, while national rail strikes will resume from Christmas Eve.
Well, let's get some live coverage. Let's go to our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, who's at Birmingham Airport for us this morning. Jack, another day, yet another sort of picket line, I guess. Explain to us, how are operations at the airport going to be disrupted because of Border Force walking out?
So, the airports are saying, Heathrow, Birmingham Airport, to expect disruption. Of course, we know there's around 1,000 Border Force and passport kind of control workers that are going on strike today and continuing to strike over pay, working conditions and others. So they're telling people to expect disruption. They don't think there's going to be too much. Of course, we know that the Army and other Ministry of Defence personnel are being brought in to try and boost the numbers, of course, that we've lost because of these striking workers. But they don't think disruption is going to be too bad, but of course they are warning people as flights coming in today, people coming home for Christmas, people flying out for Christmas. They are expecting much disruption. Heathrow, which of course is the UK's busiest airport, said that passengers arriving will be able to use the passport e-gates as usual. Here at Birmingham Airport, they're trying to minimise disruption by using those e-gates as well. But there are 579 flights due to land at Heathrow, with an estimated 10,000 passengers arriving before 7 o'clock this morning. So you can imagine that even though there are only 1,000 Border Force workers striking at these major airports, that could cause some serious disruption as well. Now, the ISU, which is one of the biggest unions for borders, immigration and customs, they tried and they held a ballot for strike action, but they didn't reach that 50% threshold in order to have their members go on strikes. We've only got people, workers from the Public and Commercial Services Union, the PCS, going on strike today. But their General Secretary, Mark Sawotka, said that the government can stop these strikes tomorrow if it put money on the table. He said, like many of our workers, our members are struggling with the cost of living crisis. They're desperate. They're being told there's no money for them. The strike, so 100,000 of their members voted to go on strike. It affects around 1,000 Border Force workers strikers today, and they're striking simply over. They want a 10% pay rise. That's one of their demands, as well as pension justice, job security, and no cuts to redundancy terms. Of course, that's one of the things that many unions are making part of their negotiation, all about redundancy and job security going into the future. But Mark Sawotka continued that we'll fight to improve our members' pay terms and conditions, regardless of who is in Downing Street. So they are holding out for this 10% pay rise, better pension, job security. So passengers arriving in today are possibly going to be disrupted by these strikes, but all the airports saying they're trying to minimise disruption. We've got personnel from the Ministry of Defence coming in, so passengers just urged to maybe leave a little bit earlier if you do have to go through passport control. If you can use the e-gates, do use those, because you will get through a lot quicker. But passengers being warned to expect that disruption today on what is one of the busiest days of the year, right before Christmas.
Jack, thank you very much. We'll check back in with you at Birmingham Airport as the day gets underway and those flights start to come in.
Well, for more on what this means for those trying to catch flights, let's speak to former Chief Immigration Officer for Border Force at Calais, Kevin Saunders, a man who's speaking a lot of common sense on this. So what will this mean for passengers today? Is this going to be chaos for those coming in, those leaving, or a bit of both?
Good morning. No, we don't do a passport control going out. So people leaving the UK shouldn't notice anything different at all. People coming in, yes, it will be more challenging. But ISU, which represents 20% of staff, have not gone out on strike. So they will be there anyway. And the Home Office have put in plans to bring very senior officers and what have you down to the controls as well. So it shouldn't be horrendously bad, but it might be a little bit longer. The big key to this is the e-gates. If the e-gates are working, then that will help considerably.
I mean, that's part of the problem, though, isn't it? If the e-gates work, it sort of adds to the argument that says, do we need this number of people at this level of pay?
Yes, you do. You need more frontline staff at the controls. I know I'm bound to say that, but yes, you do, because it's not the Brits that are the problems. It's the other people that are coming into the UK that we need to make sure that they are the right people coming in.
The people who have been trained up to step in today, are you confident that they've had enough skill set, that they can be equipped, that for some of the cases that come through, it'll be highly complex, very detailed, that they can process that effectively and also safely?
No, the military will not deal with anything that is complex at all. So I suspect that the Border Force will deploy the military onto British passport holders that don't use the e-gates, and they will be supervised very closely by a proper Border Force officer.
Hey, Kevin, can I move on now? We have a People's poll on GBNews this morning talking about the Rwanda situation, and an overriding amount of our viewers seem to approve of this. Now, as somebody who was in control of our immigration forces for 14 years, you've spoken a lot of common sense on the issue of offshore containment. Is it still your position that's the best route forward for the UK?
Oh, yes. Rwanda is definitely something that we should be looking at and dealing very seriously. What I hear is that there are other East African countries that are looking at this very closely because they're thinking, we might be able to get in on the same bandwagon here. So I think that once we get the planes taking off for Rwanda, we're going to see quite a big difference. And
that's the question, though, isn't it, Kevin? Once that happens, I mean, how confident are you? I know you're not a lawyer and you're not dealing with the legal arguments, but it looks like there's an awful lot of appeals and an awful lot of legal red tape before we see one of those planes take off with anyone on board.
Yeah.
Well, let's face it, the only people that are making anything out of this are the lawyers. And they're doing very, very nicely. But I'm a little bit upset with the charity sector that are doing this. They're very quick to go to court if they don't like something, but they're not rolling over now that we've got a decision from the High Court which says that our policy is quite legal. So it's a little bit galling, quite honestly.
Kevin, OK, Kevin, well, as it's the end of the year, if you had to give this government an end-of-year score for how they've handled the immigration system this year, what would you give them?
Oh, dear, you're going to get me into some big trouble, aren't you?
That's the point.
Yeah, probably 5 out of 10. Could do better.
And I think you're being quite charitable out there, Kevin. There's a little bit of Christmas spirit maybe in your score, but fair enough.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Multifaceted topics this morning, of course. Former Chief Immigration Officer for the UK Border Force at Cali. Kevin, really appreciate your time. It is really complicated, and it's a picture today. So if you've got family, friends, relatives coming in from abroad, and maybe they've got a slightly more, particularly if they don't have a British passport, maybe just leave a little bit more time before you pick them up. Or if you're going to the car park, bring a book to read because you don't know how long it will take for them to get through.
That's it. OK, well, let's bring you up to date with all what's going on today on the rest of the front pages.
So motorists are being warned to expect long delays as millions hit the road to spend Christmas with family and friends. The AA says today is going to be the busiest day, with an estimated 16.9 million journeys being made across the UK. Inquests
open today in Maidstone into the deaths of 4 migrants who died while trying to cross the English Channel. Their boat capsized earlier this month, sparking a major rescue operation off the Kent coast. Another 39 people were safely brought to shore. The Chancellor's being urged to scrap VAT charges on defibrillators. The SNP says removing the tax will make it easier and cheaper to build an effective network of devices across the country, saving lives. And Unison is urging the Welsh Government to negotiate over health workers' pay to avoid industrial action next year. The trade union has written an open letter to First Minister Mark Drakeford saying nurses and ambulance workers are exhausted and support future walkouts. 12 minutes past 6. Lots more to come, including we've got the latest findings from our GBNews People's Poll. Has it gone how you would have voted, Martin? So the funny thing is, as a committed Brexiteer who thinks taking back control of our borders was a central issue of many elections, I personally think the Rwanda idea is a white elephant. I think it's the wrong solution. Because it's so expensive. 140 million quid has been spent so far with 0 deportations. I think it's unlikely to ever happen. I think people want it to work, but I don't think it will. That's just my personal opinion.
The question is, what strategy if not that? And the government have said throughout, look, this is going to take multiple different approaches. We're going to look at that in a little bit and also give you the findings from our People's Poll. Don't miss it. That's after the break. Maybe we're not on a break.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. A wet and windy spell heading northwards through the day today. Most of Scotland will be dry until tonight. Mild again in the south, but chillier air continues further north. The mild but wet and windy spell, courtesy of this set of weather fronts slowly edging in. A soggy start across southwest England and Wales, and that rain drifting north now into the Midlands and southeast England too. A lot of spray, a lot of surface water on the roads, and a lot of traffic on the roads today, of course, as well. So just bear that in mind if you are hitting the roads. That wet spell will spread into northern England and Northern Ireland by lunchtime, and by the end of the day into parts of southern Scotland. A few showers in northern Scotland, some snow in Shetland, but most of Scotland dry but cold. Further south, it does turn a lot drier this afternoon, and it will be mild here as well, but it's also going to be blustery, accompanying this band of rain. Some very gusty winds. Wet and windy weather spreads into southern Scotland this evening. As it hits the colder air, there will be some snow north of the central belt on some of the higher routes this evening, so again, bear that in mind if you are travelling. Further south, it'll be rain showers that we see coming in because the milder air continues to spread northward. Still pretty windy as well through the night. And that leads into a blustery Christmas Eve. There'll be rain showers across northern England and much of Northern Ireland, and outbreaks of rain and hill snow still in parts of northern Scotland. That'll continue through the day, but Shetland may well stay largely dry. For England and Wales, actually for many places, a bright, blustery Christmas Eve with some good spells of sunshine, but showers will come in at times on that gusty wind. Mild temperatures in double figures across the south and even further north. Temperatures a little higher tomorrow compared to today. So it's a mild start to the Christmas period. Christmas Day, mild for most of us with some rain, but turning colder from the northwest during Christmas Day and colder for all of us by Boxing Day.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Well, welcome back. Breakfast on GB News. You're watching and, of course, listening to Breakfast with Martin and myself, Rosie. Time for us to look at this GB News People's Poll.
So earlier this week, the High Court concluded that it is lawful for the government to relocate asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing. And so we asked the public what they think of this decision.
40% of the public say they support the government's plan, as opposed to 29%. Maybe you're surprised. That wasn't sort of an overwhelming swing either way. 12% neither support or oppose the plan. 18% prefer not to say, or say they didn't know.
OK, let's get more reactions from the former Home Office Special Advisor and Councillor Claire Purcell. Good morning to you, Claire. So what do you make of these findings? I expected to get maybe a greater portion of GB News viewers supporting that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought the support would be higher. That's certainly the feeling you get whilst looking at social media, whilst reading newspapers. You believe that the public want this to go ahead. So it's quite surprising, actually, that the support isn't there. I do wonder if people are now seeing that the government has promised this for so long and nothing has happened, that it isn't likely to happen. It's not going to get off the ground. And so the support is moving away from it. But I really did think it would be much higher, perhaps up into 60-70%.
I think the reality is, as you've laid out there, Claire, there was a plan. People thought, OK, well, let's try it. It seems like the legal red tape to actually literally get this off the ground is so long-winded that people are thinking, well, we need a solution faster than that.
Well, that's right. And the problem is the government went into this to launch something. They believed they had to do something, and this was what they grasped on. And when it was released, it was around the time of local elections, if we think back to earlier this year, and it was launched to sort of great fanfare, but I don't think the detail was ever drilled down behind it. So it sounded very good. It sounded like an option. But when you started to look at the practicalities of doing it, it just fell apart. And I can't see, like Martin has just said, I can't actually see any planes taking off and this happening. And even if they do, Rwanda currently only has the capacity to take 200 people. Now, that could increase in the future, but we're paying out an awful lot of money and taking people in return for pretty much nothing at the moment.
I think, Claire, one of the big points of resistance to this, amongst even those who are supportive in principle, is the cost. So it's £140 million so far with 0 deportations. Do you think the gloss is wearing off? The reality is starting to shine through. This is expensive and it's unworkable.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It is an awful lot of money. And plus, as I said, you need to take people in return. We are taking some of the most vulnerable from Rwanda back into this country. So there will be an associated cost with that as well. So it is very expensive. And currently there is no airline willing to remove those people over to Rwanda for processing. So I think that the government needs to really think, if they are so wedded to this, it has to work. But you can't keep throwing good money after bad.
And a key point there, Claire, you brought up, because the global standard on this is the Australian Stop the Boats model, Operation Sovereign Waters. But the key difference there was that the Australian Navy was the carrier who took the asylum seekers to Papua New Guinea. But you just hit on a key point. No airline is even prepared to sign up for this because it would wreck their reputation, wouldn't it?
But that's right. And if you don't have that, if you don't have those airlines willing to do it, you can't even charter a private airline, which would cost you a lot of money. But even they don't want to be involved. Then I don't see how this is going to work. And it doesn't matter which country you're talking about, whether you look to put them into South America or different parts of Africa. If you don't have that method of transportation, it isn't going to happen. And removals flights have always been dogged with this problem. And those airlines really do want to protect their reputation, as any business would. So if they see that there's any kind of legal challenge, then they aren't going to do it. It was a little bit different with Australia, but also let's not forget that the Australian government have had to pay out an awful lot in compensation for keeping people illegally detained and the treatment of them within that facility.
Claire, let's move on to some other information in the poll, if we can. And sort of the most stark thing, 57% of the public who were polled said nothing in Britain works anymore. That is a very sweeping statement. Are you surprised that it was that high, 57%?
To be honest, no. Anybody who has tried to use a train within the last week will probably think that Britain is more broken than anything else. And then we've seen the state of hospitals and GP surgeries and ambulance strikes. So no, it doesn't surprise me at all. It feels at the moment as if everything has just ground to a halt. I was waiting for a couple of trains which were cancelled at the last minute for no absolute reason at all. And it's really, really frustrating. And it wasn't even a strike day. It was just a day. So I can understand why people feel that. And I don't think that's going to get any better with the strikes continuing long into the new year.
I think 57% is being charitable. I spoke to my dad last night. He said, nothing works anymore, son. What's the blooming point? I think that is becoming a key point. Something else in this poll could we talk about is the most competent Prime Minister. We've had 3 Prime Ministers in a year. Now, 3 wise men. We've had 3 of these lot. Boris Johnson came in top. Does that surprise you? I mean, do the Tories want a Boris return? Is he their last-ditch attempt to save their party?
The one thing you can say about Boris Johnson is he was a big personality, and on a campaigning front, he was excellent. I may not agree with him, but you cannot fault the way that he goes out there and people want to see him, they want to hear him speak, and he is very, very good. What he wasn't very good at was the detailed part of running a government and running a country. But if you put that to one side, politics is all about personality, and he had it by the bucket load. And that's what people wanted. People will always remember him for that. Unfortunately, the disasters that surrounded him overtook it. But I think if you can almost make a Frankenstein's monster of prime ministers, the majority of that personality comes from him.
So, obviously, Rishi Sunak takes us into the new year, a significant set of challenges, not only that he inherited, but also many that have really got worse as the time he's been Prime Minister, particularly when it comes to strikes. How has he fared so far in your mind, and do you think he's going to be able to tackle things like inflation, strike action in the new year?
This is a really difficult one because I don't think we've particularly seen much of him in action. If you're talking about previous prime ministers, they have been out on the media reassuring the public that something was going to happen. But Rishi Sunak has taken a slightly quieter approach to it and is getting on in the background. I don't always think that's a good idea. I think people want to see the kind of person that they're dealing with and they want to feel reassured. And as Martin's dad was a prime example, everything's broken, why do we bother? That's the point, that your prime minister needs to be out there stating what it is that's going on, how they're trying to make this better. Even if the news is bad, you would much rather see somebody out there talking about it than hiding away behind a desk. So I think he needs that kind of media operation to ramp up in the new year to reassure people that he is actually doing the job, because at the moment he's very, very quiet.
Claire, thank you ever so much. Not quiet from you this morning. Strong opinions, as always. Really appreciate your time on the programme. I must say good morning to Ruth, who says, can I wish you all Merry Christmas? Yes, of course you can. Yeah. Could I please ask how I get onto the GB News poll? I cannot find them. Well, that's independent research taken out with GB News. It's right. Not like something on our Twitter, so you can't sort of now try and join in and join the conversation. We've got more on the findings. I think really the worst one is that it does feel like a bit of a generalisation, Martin, to say nothing in Britain is working anymore.
Yeah, and what's also really interesting is when people were asked who can handle this, as in who can get us out of this mess, particularly around the strikes, 40% said nobody. So it seems that public...
Happy Christmas, everyone, you know.
No, but public faith in our political class seems, and it was broken by Brexit and COVID and lockdowns, and here we are again, Rosie.
I think it's easy, though, to say, like, no one's taking control of this, nothing's working, and sort of complain. Maybe we could find some positivity this morning. What is working? It might be that you have managed to successfully get all your family around the table for Christmas this year.
Yeah. Or maybe there are people out there that should be involved in politics, more ordinary people, less of the political class. I think that's a way out of this.
GBviews at gbnews.uk. Please join the conversation. After the break, we're taking a look at the morning's papers. See you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's coming up to 6:30. Welcome back to Breakfast on GB News this morning with Martin and myself, Rosie. Let's take a look at the front pages.
And The Guardian's front page leads on Scotland's new gender laws passed yesterday, with the headline Number 10 threatens to block Scottish law on legally changing gender.
The Daily Mail are leading with the same story, Scotland's gender laws. We'll look at that in a moment. And the report that the SNP, they say, are on a collision course with Westminster. Well, the law is a bill that will let 16-year-olds change their gender without a medical diagnosis.
Murderer was free to kill after probation blunders is the headline leading the Telegraph this morning, as probation services are facing backlashes for deeming Damien Bendel a medium risk.
And the Mirror leads with the King's Christmas security fears amid concerns that King Charles's Christmas walkabout may be disrupted by protesters.
And The Times leads with rising flu cases and health officials warning anyone with a cough or a cold to avoid spending time with vulnerable relatives and grandparents this Christmas. How do you do that?
Well, let's go through the papers now. Joining us this morning to do that is senior reporter from the I newspaper, Benjamin Butterworth, and also Director of Operations at the Adam Smith Institute, Morgan Schoenmeister. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. Let's start with this. It's very contentious for 6:30. But Benjamin, front page of The Guardian, what is happening in Scotland? How have they changed the law? And Westminster aren't happy.
So the willingness, the ability to have your gender, if you change gender from the one on your birth certificate, the ability to change that has been reformed so that at the moment in the rest of the UK, you have to illustrate for 2 years that you are the gender you're living as. And now in Scotland, you'll be able to get that legal recognition at 3 months, so much sooner. And that was passed late last night in Scotland. And it's the biggest rebellion that the SNP has had during its 15 years in power. And now today, Number 10 has said that they might block that because gender laws are devolved to the Scottish Parliament, but equalities laws, which this affects, as you can imagine, are not devolved. And so Number 10 Downing Street might overrule the Scottish Parliament, which I think, quite aside from the individual case of the gender questions, would be a crazy thing to do when support for independence is so finely tuned at the moment.
But a key point around this, Benjamin, is there's no need for a medical diagnosis. It's self-identification. So on that basis, isn't this worth going to battle about? Because this is a huge, huge change. And also, is this about Scotland trying to make its own laws and uncouple itself bit by bit, and therefore Westminster has to take a stand?
I mean, look, when you ask about whether Westminster should block Scottish Parliament from having these gender laws, well, it strikes me as odd that they only decided it might not be a devolved issue after it was passed. You know, these were first proposed 6 years ago, so it's quite striking that they changed their mind after the Act happens. But on the question about medical diagnosis and not having to have one, in order to get the recognition at the moment, the 2-year point in this country, in England, that is, you have to have demonstrated, you have to have lived, for example, if you're a trans woman, so male to female, you have to have lived like that for 2 years. And so this isn't affecting how people will behave or what bathrooms they might use, which is an example sometimes opponents give. This is about giving them the protection, the legal rights, the safety in themselves, and hopefully the mental comfort at an earlier stage. And, you know, Ireland, our neighbouring country, has had this in place for a few years and not had any problems.
The question, Morgan, is do you think Scotland have made the right decision? And if they have, should Westminster intervene?
I think it's an interesting one. I think, again, as Benjamin says, quite aside from the specifics of the law itself and how you feel about gender recognition, there are a few ways in which this law is diverging from UK-wide law. And if that's the case, if the government wants to take a stand and say, actually, we do need to intervene because it contravenes UK law, like the equalities law, and that's something the government, it would be unprecedented. They haven't intervened in this way before, and they only have 4 weeks to decide. So it's really going to be an issue that's not going to go away.
Do you think Scotland have made the right decision?
That's not for me really to say, honestly.
Very diplomatic.
Well,
Oh,
I mean,
I do.
It's,
You do.
Benjamin does. I mean, I have questions about the age going down to 16
Yeah.
because what we consider an adult in the UK is 18. So if Scotland is saying that you can make these legal changes at age of 16, I think that's kind of a very fundamental change. But if it were 18-year-olds and the time limit were decreased, I wouldn't be as concerned.
But Benjamin, don't you think that there are an emerging and growing number of individuals who regret going through a transition? And if that process is shortened then as far as proceeding perhaps towards surgery? Is it something that we should really, be cautious about?
First of all, in order to be eligible for surgery, you already have to have done 2 years, right, in order to get the gender recognition
But now it's
before
3
you can...
months.
Yeah.
Isn't that the issue?
But then the delays for that are many more years after that because there's a shortage of supply to help those people. So you're not just getting that. But this idea that people are going to pretend that they're a gender that they're not is just farcical. It's not what
pretending.
happens.
It could be confusion. There's lots of people who are gay, who may have been quite happy to be gay people without making transitions. There is a lot of evidence coming off people with regret after transitioning. And surely, if we're pushing that process down to a shorter period, we're creating more issues.
Well, I don't accept that at all because, there are far, far more people who will spend their entire lives hiding and disguising the fact that they are not comfortable in something as fundamental as their gender. In fact, there are many people that won't even recognise that in themselves because they never knew such a thing existed. It was the 50th anniversary of the first ever Pride in Britain this year, and I spoke to some of the people involved in that, and overwhelmingly what they said, which blew my mind, was that they didn't even know they were gay because they'd never heard of such an idea. But that didn't mean they weren't. And so when people say the numbers of people transitioning or saying they're of a different gender is much higher than it was 10 years ago, well, that's now because they feel some comfort to express themselves and some legal protection. And I think that's a better thing.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I do think we still need to tread very carefully, especially when it comes to, again, people under the age of 18 accessing what could be life-altering hormones or treatments. But at the end of the day, I do also believe that adults have every right to make decisions which benefit them and their personal well-being within the confines of the law.
And I would just say that one of the other things that's cropped up that Scotland has a divergent view on is that they don't have to inform the parents if at school a child is saying they are, if they look like a boy but they're saying they're a girl. And I think that's absolutely right, because the idea that a parent who holds a particular prejudice, a particular bigotry, as far as I'm concerned, if they don't let
parental protection, it's not just bigotry and prejudice. They may have genuine concerns and should be consulted.
If a parent tries to stop the child being themselves in the most fundamental way, as far as I'm concerned, that's child abuse. Many gay kids wouldn't tell their parents still to this day because they're terrified of the prejudices they might hold. And I think they should be comfortable in that.
A very contentious topic. Join the conversation yourself. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Let's look to something a little bit lighter if we can. And there's a photograph. Well, actually, she's on the front page of many of the papers, Morgan, on the front page of the Daily Express and the Times as well. This is going to be a weekend where we look at the royals. We're going to hear from the King in a very different way with that King's speech on the weekend. So just tell us, Kate this time takes centre stage. What's she got to say about the Queen?
Yeah, so this is Kate's second annual carol service, which happened at Westminster Abbey, and they'll be airing it this weekend as part of their festive productions.
Nice.
And she used it as a tribute to her late Majesty, and it is kind of this turning over of a new leaf in the royal family. They're obviously dealing with a lot of publicity right now, both positive and negative, and Kate is really using this opportunity to say we owe so much to the Queen, and at the same time we need to honour her legacy and also move on. And it hit me yesterday that we will be seeing the first King's speech at Christmas.
What kind of tone do you think he's going to take?
I think it will be similar to Kate's tone. I think he will, commemorate his mother and Her Late Majesty and really show that this is a new era. He's always been quite progressive when it comes to religion and accepting of all people, so I don't think it will be particularly religious remarks.
I also hope, for the new year, that this marks a return to a more stateswomanlike and kind of regal royal family, and we can get away from the celebrity froth and tittle-tattle, Benjamin.
I mean, I am, as odd as it might be as a lefty, a massive royalist, because, I just live for the drama, and my God, they bring the drama consistently. But I always sit down at 3 p.m. on Christmas Day and watch the Queen's speech, as it's always been before. And so I can't wait to see how it will feel and how it will look. I think it'll be very peculiar for a lot of us. But there's probably going to be a big emphasis on how many people watch it. Because there's a story in the Daily Mirror today about how there's fears that the walkabout they do after the church service, that there might be eggs thrown, there might be protests.
Because we've seen twice now, very recently, the King is walking about, and then you are so exposed to the public, and they've got to do that. They've got to have that type of relationship which says we're visible, we're available, but it's been scuppered on 2 occasions already.
It has, yeah. I mean, I have to say, you remember the one in, I think it was York, where they throw the egg and, Charles really was completely unbothered by it, even though it could have been anything, really. He's clearly, at 71, I think he is, pretty relaxed about the whole thing. To be honest, I think the Daily Mirror putting it on the front page that there could be protests probably makes it more likely that the idea is planted in some people's heads. I don't think anyone's really that bothered to protest on their own Christmas morning. Most of the people sat there could, barely walk for themselves, let alone throw an egg, I think. Yeah,
it's going to be a really interesting one to watch because, I think a great many people, GB viewers and myself, really miss the Queen. And it's going to be a real moment, I think, of even though we've seen the banknotes, we've seen the ceremony, I think that the speech itself is so talismanic. I think it's going to be quite
a great word. What's it mean?
Yeah. Symbolic of something awesome.
Yeah, I think, but it is going to be a moment when a lot of us really start to recognise that she's not there. And I find it, it blows my mind that it was, only September 8th, I think, that she died. That was incredibly recent. And you think about what the royal family has been through with Harry and Meghan. I think, regardless of your opinion of them, that's a particularly cruel few months they've had. It can't be nice for anyone.
Well, of course, we'll bring you the speech live here on GB News, and our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, is going to be on hand to take us through it as well. You might be busy with your Christmas meal at that time and maybe never watch it. Morgan, let's also look on the front page of the Times. Skip starters, says Nigella. She is a woman who loves to indulge and encourages others to do the same. Why no starter for her on Christmas Day?
She says she doesn't understand how people can eat starters as well as a full turkey dinner. And I do agree. I like the grazing across the day approach. So start with a nice breakfast, some starters for breakfast, and then move on to the full meal later. But you've got all your sides, you've got everything. So I don't blame her for...
So what's on your table?
So it's traditional. You got all the trimmings, so turkey, pigs and blankets, roast potatoes, parsnips,
we
gravy.
had some bizarre advice yesterday on the programme to say, I think it was Dr. Michael Mosley who was saying, for your roast potatoes, the nutrition is in the skin. And what you should do is boil them the night before, skin on, leave them, and then roast them like that.
Heresy.
It seemed very strange to me.
Sounds like a lot of extra effort for a couple
yes, apparently he was
nutrients.
saying that was more convenient, which I didn't believe at all. No. Will you be skipping a starter?
I didn't even know starters for Christmas dinner was a thing.
Lots of people apparently this year having prawn cocktail.
Oh God! No, I've never had prawn cocktail. Yeah, exactly. Each their own. But my starter is sort of a box of chocolates at about 9 a.m.
That's all right.
And the little coins that you get that we hang on our tree, the chocolate coins. So I can't really judge people having a prawn cocktail when I'm 47 mini Cadburys down.
Do you know, it's nice to talk about something positive because we conducted this poll at GB News, which concluded, very sadly, 57% of the people surveyed said they think Britain is nothing's working.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to be getting the train back to Manchester at some point today, so I might sort of have to get back to you on whether anything works, because I'm slightly anxious. I've been looking at the app and there's apparently lots of trains running, but I know everyone trying to get home this week to all different parts of the country has been having absolute hell, so it does feel like nothing works.
Yeah.
Is that fair, though? It's a very sweeping statement to say nothing in Britain's working.
I mean, everything's on strike, so that's, that's quite a good sign that nothing's working.
I'd challenge you to point something out that is working well now.
GB News is working
GB News is working well,
We're turning
yeah.
up and getting a shift in. But otherwise, I mean, I'm travelling back today on the train, and Benjamin, I share your concern. So I booked a ticket 3 weeks ago because I knew the strike was starting, because obviously I talk about strikes all the time. I got a text yesterday saying, yes, your ticket's still valid, but forget about your seat reservation. So, all right, 3 weeks planning, I'll be standing up like this for 2 hours all the way back, I bet you.
I mean, this time last week, I got the train from Manchester to London to do breakfast papers. I was meant to get home at 10 p.m. and I actually got home at just gone 2 a.m.
Right.
So, I did get there, but it was heavily, heavily delayed because they didn't have anyone to drive the train. And there wasn't even a strike on the West Coast main line.
Yeah, that's the difficulty, isn't it? When you're scuppered and you think, well, there wasn't even a strike today, what's going on? Another thing I want to ask you about in this poll, very briefly, if we can, the most competent Prime Minister of the year. Morgan, who do you think that's been?
One that we've had this year.
This year. You've got 3 to pick from.
Well, we can rule out one.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be Boris or Rishi. I think people still quite like Boris, even though they had all the scandals.
Why? Why is there that kind of Boris glow?
He's just the personality, isn't it? I mean, I feel like even in the darkest of days, he still had quite a lot more support than you would expect from a person in his position.
Yeah, it's actually 32% chose Boris, 29% Rishi. Does that surprise you, Benjamin, or is it just the best of a bad lot?
I mean, what's hilarious is the fact that there's even a choice of 3 of them for 1 year.
Yeah.
Just to reflect on that is mad. It doesn't surprise me that there's some popularity for Boris Johnson. I think it's a bit like we've settled down with a stable, healthy husband, and kind of looking back to the university romance is kind of how you might reflect on Boris Johnson. At the time, most people were pretty certain, about 60% in most polls, until he didn't want him there. So I think that's probably more indicative.
Well, we'll be looking through the poll a little bit more, and more stories from the papers in the next hour. Benjamin, Morgan, both, thank you very much. Right now, it is 6:45, though. Let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today.
An extra 1.5 million free school meals have been served in primary schools across Wales since September, feeding a further 45,000 children. Year 1 and 2 pupils are now also starting to benefit from the scheme as part of a £260 million investment from the Welsh Government.
Well, the UK government says it's going to invest £654 million into preventing homelessness over the next 2 years. They say those funds will protect tens of thousands of vulnerable people from losing their homes, providing temporary housing and support to avoid evictions.
And Scotland's Health Secretary is meeting union leaders later in a bid to avoid NHS strikes. Humza Yousaf will hold talks after nurses in Scotland rejected their latest pay offer, which would have seen their wages rise by an average of 7.5%.
The Princess of Wales, as we've just been hearing in the paper review, is paying tribute to the late Queen with a Christmas carol service that's going to air tomorrow. Kate Middleton will introduce the concert, attended by nearly 2,000 people at Westminster Abbey. She's joined by many members of the royal family, including the King and the Queen Consort.
Now, no matter how you're planning to spend this Christmas, it's important to remember that the festive season isn't jolly for everyone.
So whether you're spending with family, friends, maybe you're having to work or even going it alone, Christmas can come with a mountain of stress, financial expectations and even social stresses too.
Well, here to help with some coping mechanisms for those gearing up for a difficult Christmas is dating expert and psychologist Jo Hemmings. Top of the morning to you, Jo. So talk us through some of the issues that people can face if they're not having such a jolly Christmas, and how can they handle that?
Morning, Rosie. Morning, Martin.
Hi.
Look, it's difficult for many people for various reasons. They might have money issues. They may have lost someone they loved in the last couple of years or year and feel that they're not ready for Christmas. They don't want all that jollity. They're still feeling a bit sort of sad and distressed and melancholy about it all. And I think for people like that, there is a temptation to withdraw completely from Christmas, but then you're letting down the people that expect you there. My advice is, I suppose, 2 things. One is to give yourself a lot of self-care in the run-up to Christmas. Do the things that make you feel good about yourself, and maybe have something booked something lovely with the people that you do care about, or a weekend away after Christmas. So you've got that sense of anticipation. And the other thing I say is share your feelings. Look, if you're going to someone for Christmas and you know that you might be triggered by something, a memory that's going to make you sad, tell the host, listen, it's a bit difficult for me. They'll probably very much understand. I think once you've shared it, there is a point at which at least you've said it rather than holding it all in, waiting to feel upset. You've actually said to someone, it's going to be tough. I'm going to do my best, but bear with me if it doesn't quite pan out as we all hoped. And I think the third thing is get your pop-in mindset on. So if there are things you don't want to go to, like parties, social events, even the big day, pop in in the morning, pop in on Boxing Day, pop in on Christmas Eve, pop into the party. That sort of sense that you're not exposed to all those feelings for a prolonged period of time, I think can really help. You're going to go, people are going to be pleased to see you've made a wonderful compromise, but you are popping in, whether that's half an hour, 40 minutes. It helps you feel better about your concerns, I think.
I'm just imagining you might be listening to this morning thinking, I don't have people to pop in on, I haven't been invited to those parties. How do you combat loneliness?
I mean, that's really tough, and there are a lot of people who are feeling lonely at Christmas. And I think if you can't go to see people, but you do have people, use the technology we've got available. We got used to it a bit during COVID. We Zoomed people who couldn't be at our table. I mean, I've got a strange situation of having my birthday on Christmas Day.
Oh, no.
And my my son's birthday is Christmas Day.
How do you handle that? Do you kind of have time chunks where it's someone's birthday or not?
Well, we've had a couple of years where we haven't all been together. So I've, been on my own actually 1 year during COVID. So I sort of know what that feels like. And we did everything we could on Zoom just to connect. So again, that's important. If you've got no one, I think the thing to do is, again, look at self-care and go, right, I'm going to do all the things I might not do. I'm going to eat the food I like. I'm going to watch the movies I like. Some people don't like Christmas. Don't watch a Christmas movie. Watch a summer rom-com. Do some. It's just one day. At the end of it, we've had a massive build-up, but really it's just one key day. And if you could organise something for yourself after that day, it will go quite quickly for people, I think.
I've got to say about the Christmas and birthday falling at the same time. I had a friend whose birthday was Christmas Day and he complained all the time because he didn't get double amounts of presents. Is that the same in your household?
Well, I suppose it was. There is that bit when someone gives you a present, they go, happy birthday and Christmas, and there's a slight look of disappointment, really. Go on, then. But we do, I suppose I got used to it through my parents. We did Christmas in the morning, so presents are open, and birthday presents are opened in the afternoon with a birthday cake, and they must be in birthday wrapping paper. That's the most important.
Yes, it's just that extra effort. Look, one of the biggest stresses for people who aren't lonely is maybe the personalities around the table, the people you're spending time with, the managed expectations. We were talking earlier in the week about the sort of number of arguments that most families will have on Christmas Day. How do you mitigate against that very high level of expectation that everyone has to have the best day, it's got to be perfect, and make sure people do enjoy themselves?
I know, and everybody expects it to be perfect, but I think most families have a skirmish or two over Christmas, because what you're doing is getting together a large group of possibly dysfunctional people, I mean, as a group, blended families, people that don't necessarily want to be at that relative, they wanted to be at a different relative. It's hot, it's stuffy. We start drinking Bucks Fizz or mimosas or whatever at 11 o'clock in the morning. Who does that? We've got a big meal prepare. It's quite precise. It's difficult. Everything. It's hot in the house. All those things conspire to make people feel irritable, let alone the people that they're with. Fling windows open. Take the dog for a walk. Poor dog. Quite often is taken for a walk far more times than they want to be. But get out there in the open air. Organise a walk. If you feel a row brewing, and we can preempt it, we can sort of sense it coming on, I think, again, it's important to distract someone, clear a table, get out some more nibbles, play a game. Just try and not let the inevitable irritations and fidgetiness and annoyances sort of get to you, if you can rise above it for just that one day, it really does stop those rows escalating, and they can do. Fueled by alcohol, fueled by the heat, fueled by a difficult set of people, they can escalate to something quite unpleasant, and that's not what we want. So sort of preempt them, know that they may be coming, and knock them on the head when they do.
Now, Jo, sadly, inevitably, and I know from personal experience, you do get some rows at Christmas. So if you do fall out over the plum duff and the turkey, what's the best way of kissing and making up? Is it just always best to say sorry?
I think so. Even if you don't feel, if you feel you're in the right, you've just got to get through that day, and you've got to get through it in the nicest possible way. So even if you're absolutely determined you're right, it's easier to say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Move on, and just don't give it oxygen to sort of turn into something bigger and to thrive. So yeah, you've got to get through it. We've got to have little techniques and tips to not allow these things to overwhelm us or spoil a day for other people or for ourselves. So yeah, we have them in our house quite frequently. I've learned how to cap them now and not get wound up by them, and it's because I say I'm sorry.
How do you do it? What's your secret?
Well, just experience of knowing if I don't say it, what happens is
you don't want it to explode.
It escalates into something much more unpleasant, which usually ends up one of us going out the room sort of, wanting to have a cry. So it's better just to say, it's better to diffuse it. Someone's got to be the grown-up, the bigger person. It's me in this case. So,
Jo, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have a happy Christmas and hopefully an argument-free or quick argument Christmas Day. Jo Hemmings, really appreciate your time. Martin, my goodness. It's just, I think the research was saying it's by about 10:15 you've already had the first argument, the average family, on Christmas Day.
There's so much pressure, isn't there? We've talked during the week about having the perfect Christmas. And this year, of course, even getting home is going to be tough. I know it's not far for you to go across London, but everyone's worried about getting there. When you get there, you're anxious and all this. So I just hope we can enjoy this Christmas.
Well, apparently, everyone at home says nothing in Britain is working.
I know. Well,
so
Christmas still works.
We've got a bit of positivity to come. And morning to Deborah, who says, I'll tell you who's working. Supermarket, retail, pub, restaurant workers, couriers and binmen. Well, yes, I can say yes to that. Deborah, thank you. Lots to come on the latest border force strikes, though, which begin this morning after this.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. A wet and windy spell heading northwards through the day today. Most of Scotland will be dry until tonight. Mild again in the south, but chillier air continues further north. The mild but wet and windy spell, courtesy of this set of weather fronts slowly edging in. A soggy start across southwest England and Wales, and that rain drifting north now into the Midlands and southeast England too. A lot of spray, a lot of surface water on the roads, and a lot of traffic on the roads today, of course, as well. So just bear that in mind if you are hitting the roads. That wet spell will spread into northern England and Northern Ireland by lunchtime, and by the end of the day into parts of southern Scotland. A few showers in northern Scotland, some snow in Shetland, but most of Scotland dry but cold. Further south, it does turn a lot drier this afternoon, and it will be mild here as well, but it's also going to be blustery, accompanying this band of rain. Some very gusty winds. Wet and windy weather spreads into southern Scotland this evening. As it hits the colder air, there will be some snow north of the central belt on some of the higher routes this evening, so again, bear that in mind if you are travelling. Further south, it'll be rain showers that we see coming in because the milder air continues to spread northward. Still pretty windy as well through the night. And that leads into a blustery Christmas Eve. There'll be rain showers across northern England and much of Northern Ireland, and outbreaks of rain and hill snow still in parts of northern Scotland. That'll continue through the day, but Shetland may well stay largely dry. For England and Wales, actually for many places, a bright, blustery Christmas Eve with some good spells of sunshine, but showers will come in at times on that gusty wind. Mild temperatures in double figures across the south and even further north. Temperatures a little higher tomorrow compared to today. So it's a mild start to the Christmas period. Christmas Day, mild for most of us with some rain, but turning colder from the northwest during Christmas Day and colder for all of us by Boxing Day.
Join me, Calvin Robinson, on Christmas Eve and Day to explore how this special period has become a source of hope with an especially festive show. Expect Christmas carols, nativity readings, and interviews with special guests. And it's all filmed in a church for that proper Christmas feeling. Christmas, a message of hope at 2 p.m. on Christmas Eve and 5 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Christmas Day. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
It's a border farce. Travellers arriving into the UK have been told to expect disruption as Border Force workers begin strikes.
A very good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Friday, the 23rd of December. This is Breakfast on GB News. This morning with Martin Daubney and me, Rosie Wright. Here are your top stories.
Millions are being warned of travel delays as Border Force staff begin 8 days of strike over pay. With postal workers also walking out today and more rail chaos underway, a GB News survey reveals more than half of us think nothing works in this country anymore.
Also today, ministers have threatened to veto Nicola Sturgeon's gender law after the SNP passed a bill that allows trans people to self-declare their gender.
And in our GB News People's Poll, we asked voters what they think about the plan to move asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing, with some surprising results.
And it's traditionally the busiest shopping day of the year. Are you ready? We'll be discussing all things Christmas as many of you prepare to hit the shops for some last-minute purchases.
And as ever, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or, of course, on Twitter.
Right, welcome back to the programme. Travellers arriving into the UK are being warned that it might be for you. You've got friends and family travelling to spend Christmas with you. expect delays at passport control because passport control workers begin strikes over pay and working conditions. It's Border Force staff, now the latest UK workers to go on strike in what is, as you know, one of the busiest times of the year.
Over 1,000 workers are set to walk out, affecting passport control desks at Birmingham, Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Cardiff and Glasgow airports, as well as the port of Newhaven. Elsewhere, postal workers are set to stage another walkout today, while national rail strikes will resume from Christmas Eve.
Well, let's get some live coverage. We're going to our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, who's at Birmingham Airport for us this morning. Jack, just talk us through then, what is going to be the impact on the airport's operations as a result of Border Force staff not turning up to work today?
So the airports are basically saying that to expect some disruption, to expect some delays, because of course there's 1,000 PCS, the Public and Commercial Services union members. They've walked out today, those Border Force and passport check officers. So Ministry of Defence and other civil servants, and as well as the Army, have had to be brought in to make up those numbers today. So people are saying expect some disruption. The big thing that that's going to lead to whether there's a big disruption or not is whether these e-gates at passports work, at airports work. If these e-gates work for people coming into the country and people checking in to leave, then there shouldn't be as much disruption as we might expect. But if those e-gates fail to work, as we heard Kevin Saunders, the former Border Force chief on the programme a little bit earlier on, saying it's all really depending on these e-gates. There's going to be thousands of flights arriving over the course of these strikes. Nearly 9,000 flights over the course of these Border Force strikes are coming into the UK. That's almost over 1 million passengers that are going to be trying to get in and out of the country that could well be disrupted. But this is all, and this strike is all over pay, pensions and also job security as well. 100,000 PCS members from over 214 different government departments voted for strike action. And essentially, it's over a 10% pay rise. That's one of the demands. Pensions, pension justice, job security, and no cuts to redundancy pay. That redundancy and job security is one of the things that a lot of unions are trying to bring as part of the negotiation deal as they try and negotiate their way outside out of strikes. The PCS General Secretary Mark Sawatka said the government can stop these strikes tomorrow if it put money on the table. He said that, like so many workers, our members are struggling with the cost of living crisis. They're desperate and they're being told there is no money for them, while ministers give out government contracts worth billions of pounds. Some sections of the media have accused us of playing politics with these strikes, and will fight to improve our members' pay terms and conditions regardless of who is in Downing Street. Now, in terms of Heathrow, of course, one of the busiest airports in the UK, 579 flights are due to land there before 7 a.m. this morning. So you can imagine how there might already be some disruption. In terms of the situation here at Birmingham Airport, I've been checking arrivals and the live kind of scheduling. It seems that there are some delays starting to now happen with flights trying to come in to the country, of course, when those main passport checks take place. And so we are, like I said, relying on these e-gates in order to ensure that there is a smooth passage for passengers coming in and out of the country. Now, going forward over Christmas, of course, these strikes are going to continue. This first strike for Border Force is from the 23rd to the 26th of December, and then they pick it up from the 28th to the 31st. So this busiest time of the year, when people are trying to fly away somewhere and maybe nice for Christmas, or go and see family, or certainly come and arrive in the UK to spend Christmas with family, there is going to be some disruption. Paul Charles, who's the chief executive of the travel consultancy, the PC agency, said passengers are likely to face longer queues and delays during this festive period and could find themselves stuck on arrivals aircraft. There have been quite a few aircraft leaving and taking off right behind me, which is great because I'm not really much of a plane spotter, but I think I am today. But over the festive period, there is going to be some disruption for passengers coming into the UK, and airports around the country advising people just to give yourselves that little bit more time.
OK, Jack Carson at Birmingham Airport there in the cold and the dark. Go and get yourself a nice, well-earned hot cup of tea. I hope they're not on strike. OK, so let's bring in now Roger Seifert, Professor of Industrial Relations at the University of Wolverhampton, into this conversation. Good morning, Roger. What do you make of today's Border Force strikes?
Well, it's inevitable, I guess, because everyone's having a hit to their standard of living. In the case of civil servants at the moment, government's offering them between 2% and 3%, which is far lower than they're offering other public sector workers.
Roger, I'm sorry. Speaking up a little bit, it's quite hard to hear you.
Sorry? Yeah.
Just could you speak up a little bit? It's quite hard to hear you. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear now?
That's much better.
Yeah? I can lean forward.
Perfect.
Is that any better?
Carry on, yes.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying it's inevitable because the government's offering them 2 to 3% below the going rate for everybody else. And at the end of the day, people aren't prepared to accept a 7% cut in real terms. So civil servants, amongst others, are voted to strike. And this is obviously one area where they have immediate and quite sensational impact on the travelling public.
So define, what is that impact? How are we going to feel it?
Well, it's just been explained to you in the case of Border Force that people simply are going to have massive queues coming into the country. And also, even if you bring in non-experts to patrol our borders in that way, they're going to make mistakes. So not only are you going to have long queues, but people who shouldn't be coming in will be allowed in. So it's really a serious matter. And government has got to stop sitting on its hands and get negotiating and increase pay offers. There's no way around all this. It's a disaster for the country. And a government that does nothing and just says no, 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 is not really going to make its popularity change at all. It's a lack of leadership of quite a disastrous proportions.
But Roger, I mean, it's good to see in one sense these are some queues at airports that can't be blamed on Brexit. But don't you think that the timing of all these strikes is absolutely cynical to hit people at Christmas when they want to travel the most? There's no due regard at all for the public, is it? In fact, making maximum impact on the public is the point. Misery is what they want.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's absolutely no point in going on strike unless you have a significant impact on your employer's business. I mean, that's the whole point. Whether you call it cynical or whether you call it hard-headed bargaining, it doesn't matter. There's no point in striking unless it really hurts.
We've been told that there are sort of robust plans in place. You've mentioned that it's not just about queues. Actually, that isn't the major concern. That's going to be a real inconvenience. But the problem is people filling in to do these roles, making extremely complex decisions about who is allowed into the country. Are you worried about that?
I'm not worried personally, but I think the government is completely dishonest. Saying that there's robust alternatives is just a PR exercise. It's not real. You can only bring in troops and other people in for a very short time. They're not experts. And it just really makes everything worse, by the way. It annoys the strikers because they feel they're being undermined. It worries people about security. But also, as the strikers want, it throws a spotlight on their skill set and how important they are to the country. And maybe the government should think again about only offering them 3%. I mean, they'll settle for something like 6%. It's not like they're asking for the moon. But the government won't even sit down. The General Secretary of PCS made it quite clear the government sits down and says, we will negotiate on pay. Then the strikes come off. So I think we can quite clear the responsibility is with government who are sitting on their hands and, as you say, potentially putting us in danger.
And they're busy with dealing many sectors going on strike. Yeah. Roger Seifert, Professor of Industrial Relations at the University of Wolverhampton, thank you very much for your time this morning. I want to bring a little bit of positivity, if we can. At 10 minutes past 7, we've had a message in from Jacqueline, because we're going to talk very briefly about this poll that we conducted, which said loads of us say nothing in Britain is working. I think we should create a list as the programme goes on. What is working? And Jacqueline has said care staff are working. And that adds to the list we've already got that's got couriers, supermarket workers, pubs and restaurant workers and bin men.
And an interesting thing about that is almost the same list as during lockdowns. If you remember the sort of heroes, the unsung heroes, care home workers, supermarket workers, corner shop workers that just had to carry on. Teachers, obviously they're on half term now. But it does feel like, I think, a sort of a lockdown again, not by a virus, but by strikes.
My goodness, do you believe we're the same? Let us know, gbviews@gbnews.uk. What is working, and has strike action sort of enforced a mini type of lockdown?
It has,
OK, let us know. Right now, though, 11 minutes past 7. Let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today.
Motorists are being warned to expect long delays as millions hit the road to spend Christmas with family and friends. The AA says today will be the busiest day, with an estimated 16.9 million journeys being made across the UK. Congestion could also be increased tomorrow due to another strike by thousands of RMT members working at Network Rail, which will last until the 27th of December.
Inquest opened today in Maidstone into the deaths of 4 migrants who died whilst trying to cross the English Channel. Their boat capsized early this month. That sparked a major rescue operation off the Kent coast. Another 39 people were safely brought to shore.
And the Chancellor is being urged to scrap VAT charges on defibrillators. The SNP says removing the tax will make it easier and cheaper to build an effective network of the devices across the country, saving lives.
Unison's urging the Welsh Government to negotiate over health workers' pay to avoid industrial action next year. The trade union's written an open letter to First Minister Mark Drakeford saying nurses and ambulance workers are exhausted and support future walkouts. Right, let's take a look at the GB News People's Poll.
The range of questions from the Rwanda migration plan to the strikes and to the competency of our last three Prime Ministers this year. For more analysis on the polls, let's speak to the academic and Professor of Politics, Matt Goodwin. Morning, Matt. What do you make of it?
Good morning. Well, we've got a lot of interesting content this week. Firstly, we've got the vote intention. The Conservatives back down to 22%. Labour still riding high on 46%, so not much sign of that Rishi recovery this week. We've also looked at, is Britain working? 57% of the country say no, it's not working, and that actually unites Leavers and Remainers, everyone across the political divide saying nothing is really working in the country anymore. And of course, this was the year of the 3 prime ministers. We had Boris Johnson, we had Liz Truss, we had Rishi Sunak. So we asked voters, which do you think was the most competent of the 3 prime ministers? Boris Johnson comes number 1, Rishi Sunak number 2, Liz Truss number 3. I'd love to meet the 3% of voters who felt Liz Truss was the most competent. Among Conservatives, Boris Johnson is ahead by 40 points. His brand is still very, very strong among Conservatives. So lots of interesting stuff regarding politics. And just one other thing, we asked about the Rwanda plan. Obviously, we had the High Court ruling this week, the ruling that the plan is legal. And once again, after a similar question in the autumn, we find that more voters support the Rwanda plan than oppose it. And that is especially true among those Conservative and Leave voters. About 2/3 to 3/4 of those voters say the Rwanda plan, for me, is the right response.
Right, lots of people have been messaging in this morning saying, oh, I want to take part in the poll. Is it on Twitter? What's going on? Just talk us through how you do the research.
Yeah, sure, Rosie, absolutely. So we're drawing our data from a large existing panel of voters across the country, and then we're weighting that data to make it representative of the British population. So this isn't a poll you can self-select into. That brings its own problems. This is a very high quality data source, and we're then adjusting our sample to make it representative of the wider country, and we're asking them questions pretty much every week. So if people have a suggestion for a question they'd like us to ask, please feel free to reach out to me at Twitter, and I'll definitely take that into mind.
Matt, there's something also really interesting in this poll about who can handle the strike. So politically, who's best positioned to take care of this? Yeah. 64% said neither Rishi nor Starmer. 40% of those you asked said nobody. I mean, is this an indication, Matt, of a complete collapse in the public's faith in our political class?
Yeah, I said something like along these lines last night, actually, on Twitter after having a debate on GB about the public mood. And one thing that I pointed out is, I've been polling a long time, but I've never seen the British people as fed up, as exasperated and as disillusioned as they are today. And the thing is, Martin, in my mind, what I see each week is I don't see really that people think anybody in the current political class has the answer to inflation, has the answer to the NHS, has the answer to the borders and the migration crisis. And we've got a level of disillusionment here that is very palpable. And as you say on this question on the strikes, actually the most popular answer isn't Keir Starmer and it isn't Rishi Sunak. It's none of them. It's nobody in Westminster. And this, to me, reminds me of British politics in the early 2010s, very febrile, very polarizing, people just looking for something new, something different. And at the moment, I think that's why I'm expecting 2023 to be a bit of a bumpy ride again for the main parties in Westminster.
About just for public sentiment as a whole, you've been monitoring how the public feel and sort of taking a litmus test of our opinions on all these big hot topics. You would think at this time, we're post the pandemic largely, Brexit, that was very chaotic, but that seems to have been and done. We've now got a prime minister and a bit more political stability, that we should be feeling a little more settled, but you're not seeing that.
Well, Rosie, what we're dealing with is a hangover of that crisis. We're dealing with the economic hangover of COVID-19. We've got debt, we've got inflation, we've got interest rates, cost of living crisis. But I would argue we're also dealing with a political hangover from that crisis. We've got a prime minister who, of course, didn't really win a mandate from party members or from party voters. We've got two political parties that I think it's fair to say are struggling to articulate a vision for the current era that we're in. That neither Labour nor the Conservatives seem to be fully connecting with the country. And then we've got these very specific crises. We've got the border crisis with the Channel crossings. We've got the war in Ukraine, which is further impacting on energy. And so we're being bombarded on all sides. And just one last thing to keep in mind. Remember, a few years ago, somebody said this was going to be the roaring 20s. The good times were back after the chaos of the 2010s and the financial crash. But it turns out in the minds of many voters, actually, what we're looking at is something, a bit like the ruined 20s. Everybody's got a sense the future's going to be a little bit worse than the present, and the present is already a little bit worse than the past. So what we're looking for is some new leadership, I think, in the country, some new optimistic, positive leadership, somebody with some bold answers to get at the root of these problems, from the NHS to the transport strikes.
So, Matt, very quickly, that brings me to my final question. And I follow you on your Substack. It's an excellent read. And I know you talk about this void. Is there room for a new movement? And I know you've spoken about Nigel Farage, the comeback king. Is that vacuum there for real change? Or will people just continue to vote for the two big parties as they usually always do?
Well, the mood is definitely there. We've got a lot of minor parties up again this week in the polls, the Greens, Reform. We've got a lot of people saying, actually, I'm not interested in Labour and the Conservatives at the moment. The challenge those parties face, Martin, is the first past the post system. Unlike the 2010s, we don't have the European Parliament elections now, which, of course, were under proportional representation. We've got first past the post. So whoever's going to sort of run at this system, I think is going to have to do two things. They're going to have to build up a very strong local presence, and they're going to probably have to convince a handful, if not more, of MPs in Westminster to defect. And it's going to have to be a very different strategy from anything that was pursued before, because we've got this very unfavourable election system for new challenger parties.
Thank you so much, Professor of Politics and academic who helped conduct that research for us. Really appreciate your time this morning. And it was looking a bit gloomy, but loads of people are getting in touch to say what is working, because 57% of people said Britain wasn't working. Angie says, why does everyone forget to mention lorry drivers? Well, that's a very good point. Backbone Workers Mel in Shropshire says, what about farmers? 365 days of the year. Thank you for that. Gary, the police says that they're working. The armed services, pharmacy staff are working. And Elaine also says, what if farmers went on strike? So instead of what isn't working, maybe what is this morning? And if it's you, and if you're working Christmas Day, let us know, because we'd love to give you a shout-out.
Very positive news. Well done, Rosie, for bringing back the
mood
in the room. Well done. So, more to come, including a look at the latest sports news next, and that's after this break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. Morning to Sharon, who says pub cleaners are working. She says, I wish you would remember them. Well, there we go. And Colin as well, who says, no one ever mentions local government workers also working. This is because if you were just with us before the break, this very gloomy poll from the GB News audience, or the public actually, said 57% of us said nothing is working. So we're trying to work out who is and what they're doing. So keep those comments coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Well, we're joined now by somebody who most definitely is working.
I'm working very, very hard. Very, very hard.
Here to lighten the mood, the cabaret Paul with all the sports news. So let's start with the, as I call it, the old League
It is the old League Cup.
Yeah.
See, the thing is, you can still call it the League Cup, I believe, because it's still the same trophy.
Yeah.
But it has changed through sponsors over the years. It's always been a drink. It's been the Carling Cup, it's been the Milk Cup, although the Littlewoods Cup, it had so many different names.
Yeah.
Carabao Cup at the moment. But anyway, we're heading towards the quarter-final, and it was a great game yesterday.
Yeah, Man City 3,
Liverpool 2.
Yeah.
So, and quite frankly, I think the two best sides in the country, obviously apart from Nottingham Forest.
Well,
Martin.
thanks for mentioning that.
Apart from Nottingham Forest, the two best sides in the country, toe-to-toe, nobody was more than one goal ahead, and it was a fantastic game. Kevin De Bruyne, I thought, was amazing, which is good considering he came back from playing for Belgium in the World Cup, which was a complete disaster and didn't seem too interested about the whole thing.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's back and it was great, I thought, yesterday.
Calvin Phillips not playing last night.
Yes.
What's happening?
Well, Calvin Phillips signed for City, and I think he's only played about 50 minutes for them since he signed. So anyway, he's gone to the World Cup, and he was injured for quite some time, so I hadn't really played much. So gone to the World Cup, played about 40 minutes, came on as a substitute, but has come back. And Pep Guardiola has said, because he wasn't in the squad, that he's not come back in a fit state. So exactly whether that means he's just not fit enough to play or whether he feels as if he's not put enough work in.
Do you think that's a fair evaluation?
Yeah, but the thing is, though, he should have been... I mean, if he's come back and he's playing the World Cup, you'd expect that he would come back in a fit state to train. And it seems that Pep was quite sharp about the situation and just said he's not fit enough to train at the moment, so... Watch this space. I don't know whether there's a little more... See, you know what he's like, Pep Guardiola. There's always a little something there under the surface. So where there's been something and said, well, this is not good enough, you need to come back more ready. But then he's just come back from the World Cup, so could be nothing.
Somebody else who came back from the World Cup. It's been a year of tears for a certain Mr. Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yes.
He cried off at Man United. He cried off at the final Portugal game. But there's news that he might sign for a new team.
Well, he could go to Saudi Arabia because I think...
What a surprise, where there's loads of money.
Well, the thing is, there's two ways of looking at it. We can either look at it and think, well, is he going over there for the money? He doesn't need the money. But there's the other side, is that nobody really wants him.
Wow.
I mean, this is a man who, in his mind, is probably the same as he was when he was 25. But he's 37 years old now. He's had problems with Manchester United, and like you say, you know, there's the arguments there, it wasn't comfortable, and then also with Portugal. So our clubs that are in Europe, and certainly in this country as well, they're going to look at Cristiano Ronaldo and think, yeah, we want him. Well, no, because he's not playing that great. No, because he's going to cause them trouble. And no, because it's going to cost so much money. I mean, he was offered €300 million for a 2-year deal during the summer. So it looks like that is probably where he's going to end up. He'll probably end up... He's either Qatar in the All-Stars League or playing in Saudi Arabia. So it's whether the ego is going to take the fact that he plays out there, he'll probably come out and say, it's not for the money, it's the football, it's the future of football, and that's the reason. And we'll just smell something that just doesn't seem quite right. But if, you know, maybe it's time to call it a day.
FIFA formally investigating Salt Bay. Explain what happened.
Salt Bay.
Martin apparently can do an impression of Salt
Bay.
Yeah,
this Wally that sort of does this and puts salt on £4,000 steaks for idiots.
They call them, I think they call them high-class steakhouses. As when I read a review, it said over-salted and overpriced. I don't know whether that was him or whether that was the steaks. So they've got these steakhouses. There's in London, in Los Angeles and in Dubai. And he's become friends with Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA. Now, you've probably seen stuff with him. There he is. There's Salt Bay. There he is with the sunglasses. Lionel Messi looking confused, thinking, who is this man? Why is he tapping me? And why is he sprinkling salt over my head? And the thing is, there's a rule with FIFA that the only people that are allowed to hold the World Cup are winners, ex-winners, and heads of state. Nobody else could actually touch the cup.
I never knew that,
It's that important.
Wow.
You can't. It's just a rule. So, anyway, this picture's of Salt Bay. He's holding the World Cup and he's got his arm round the Argentina players who are looking a little confused. So then there's been another video that's come out of Gianni Infantino at Salt Bay's restaurant, and there's Salt Bay doing, as Martin did, the little sprinkle there, and then he's got the knife, and he's doing this, and it's like, what are you doing? Like this. And Gianni Infantino was going, oh, you are a legend. So I think that's where the final tickets came from.
He bribed his way onto the pitch.
Well, how did he end up getting on the pitch and having a pass to be able to do that? And so now FIFA are looking into this and thinking, how did he? Well, maybe you should look at your president, and maybe you got
So maybe Saltby didn't actually really do anything wrong.
Well, you know what? If he had the
blagged it.
pass, he was allowed to go there, but he's just one of those very annoying characters.
Very quickly, I once did lift the World Cup. It came to London, I worked at the News of the World, and they brought it in, they said, no touching. I thought, I've only got one chance, and I grabbed it and I lifted it in the air.
Yeah.
I got frog marched out the room by FIFA security.
Did you really? Is that right?
I actually lifted the World Cup.
Wow.
Yeah, I did. And it's not as heavy as you think.
You are such a drama king, Mark.
Honestly,
I
you
thought I'll only get-
couldn't help yourself.
I'll only get
Don't
one
touch
chance.
the World Cup.
Yeah.
You're lifting it up. So really, so the rule is ex-winners, heads of state, you and Salt Bay. That's it. The only people that can hold a World Cup. You never know, you might have got yourself a free meal out of that, my son.
Cool. Thank you so much. We thought we'd said goodbye to you yesterday for the New Year, but you're in again.
Well, it takes one to know one there, Rosie. It's lovely to see you.
Well, really appreciate it. An overview of what's been kicking off in the sport, literally, and with Salt. Right now, it's gone 7:30, though. Lots more to come here. We'll be going through the newspapers after this short break.
Great.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 7:36. You're listening and watching Breakfast with Martin and Rosie this morning. We've been asking you who's working, because apparently the British population say Britain isn't working. A very good morning to Leslie, who says the church is working, well, particularly this weekend, around the clock. Food banks are working, volunteers are working as well. John, I don't know what we think about this, Martin. He says, am I classed as working today if I got up at 4 a.m. to take my wife to work, who is?
I would say that's half in, half out, but definitely brownie points.
There we go.
100%.
We'll keep your views coming in. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We're sort of rebelling against this idea that Britain's not working. What is? But in the meantime, let's take a look at today's front pages, and we'll kick off with the Times.
Yeah, the Times leads with rising flu cases and health officials warning anyone with a cough or a cold to avoid spending time with vulnerable relatives and grandparents this Christmas. How do you do that?
The Guardian's front page leads on Scotland's new gender laws that were passed yesterday. Their headline is Number 10 threatens to block Scottish law on legally changing your gender.
And the Daily Mail are also leading with Scotland's gender laws and report that the SNP are on a collision course with Westminster after passing a bill to let 16-year-olds change gender without medical diagnosis.
The Telegraph, murderer was free to kill after probation blunders. Well, that's the headline. After the probation services are facing a backlash now for deeming Damien Bendel medium risk.
And finally, the Daily Mirror leads with the King's Xmas security fears amid concerns that King Charles's Christmas walkabout may be disrupted by yet more protesters, perhaps throwing eggs.
Are you an Xmas or a Christmas man?
I'm definitely Christmas, although I tend to text Xmas because I'm lazy.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Well, let's find out the views of our paper reviewers. Joining us this morning is senior reporter from the newspaper, Benjamin Butterworth, and also Director of Operations at the Adam Smith Institute, Morgan Schuldenmeister. Thank you very much, both of you, for coming in. Morgan, let's start with you if you can. And the front page of the Financial Times. We didn't bring you that one already. Joe Biden, under scrutiny. What's happened?
Yeah, so Joe Biden's been criticised by quite a few EU countries, and now Kemi Badenoch has joined in and says that the new Inflation Reduction Act in the US, that is focusing on creating a green economy. This is over $300 billion plan, and they're saying it breaks trade rules because it disadvantages foreign producers of cars and manufacturers. And it goes against WTO rules.
What's really interesting for me as a long-term observer and participant of Brexit is that this is exactly what Biden complained about Britain wanting to do post-EU membership, as in putting grants towards electric vehicle manufacturers, as he's saying here, so it's preferential treatment for buying domestically. And lo and behold, the EU are unhappy about it. It's a bitter sense of irony, I think. For me.
Well, let's talk about Joe Biden's potential UK trip, Benjamin. This is on page 7 of the Eye. He wants progress on Northern Ireland before he's prepared to come over.
Yep, so it's an exclusive in today's Eye newspaper that says that a planned trip for the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement may well not go ahead, or at least Biden won't be a part of it because he wants that progress to happen. So Secretary of State Antony Blinken is apparently saying that unless Rishi Sunak comes to a deal with the EU before that happens, then Joe Biden isn't going to visit. And I think, that's pretty provocative of the US president. It says that he is otherwise very keen to come because of his Irish ancestry. Now, he is welcome to talk about his Irish ancestry, but it always drives me mad because Barack Obama is just as Irish as Joe Biden. They both had, I think, a great-great-great-grandfather leave Ireland in the same year. So Joe Biden is no more Irish than Obama, who didn't go on about it quite so much.
Yeah.
But I think this will be a sharp nudge to someone like Sunak because, the idea of the US sending a message like this, that we're not turning up, which is such a big deal when the US president comes, I think they're clearly trying to have some soft power here.
Yeah, I think it's a bit antagonistic, and I think it makes out this picture, especially in the US, my homeland, that nothing's happening, and both sides are not even willing to come to a conclusion. I think people are working very hard to solve this and are trying to keep best relationships as possible. And I think this is kind of saying, we'll put you on the naughty step if you don't behave. And back to Biden's Irish ancestry, I also find it funny, as an American from New England, whose great-grandfather was born in Ireland, I'm more Irish than he is, but I'm not going around saying that I am Irish, because you would all make fun of me if I'm sitting here in the UK saying that I'm Irish and English.
Another quick point, especially to you, Ben, I think it's interesting how Biden interfering in British politics in this way is seen as a constructive thing or a good thing, whereas when Trump did it, it was chaos. How dare you say Brexit's a good idea? This is the same thing, but the Liberal press don't seem to object quite as much.
I mean, I could easily put that back to you, because I'm sure when Barack Obama said that the UK will be at the back of the queue for a trade deal, I suspect you said, how dare he interfere? So I think
did.
I think that goes both ways.
I absolutely did.
But look, on the case of the Good Friday Agreement, which is what Biden is reportedly referring to, the US is a signatory to ensuring peace in Northern Ireland. So, they made a pledge 24 years ago to stick by that, and arguably that's what he's doing by nudging Sunak in this way.
Yep.
Let's move on to rail fares. Bad news here, I'm afraid. Front page of the Telegraph, Morgan. They're going up, and it's the biggest increase since 2012.
Yeah, so rail fares have been increasing, over the years as we've seen. But I think what's particularly going to bite this year is you're seeing those increases at the same time that we're having mass disruption with the rail lines. We're having strikes. There's lack of availability of staff, even on non-strike days. So I think people are really going to start seeing, this hurt and ask, are we getting our value for money?
It's a 5.9% rise from March, which actually the government is heralding as some kind of victory, aren't they? Because they're actually putting billions towards Network Rail to try and keep this below inflation, aren't they? So even though it's a 6% rise nearly, the government are saying this is the victory, which is odd.
Well, if you see increases in price like this, it does have inflationary effects. So to see that it's not rising by inflation or more is definitely a good point here.
Yeah.
But I still think consumers will be wondering what their money is getting them.
Yeah, right.
Let's look at the front page of the Times now, if we can. And there's this question, got a cough or a cold? Loads of people have been ill, particularly this year. Yeah. Stay away from grandparents. What's the advice, Benjamin?
So the UK Health Security Agency, which was the one that had a lot to do with the COVID vaccines and became prominent during the pandemic, their advice now is that if you have a cough or a cold, stay away, because apparently there are 9.56 admissions to hospital related to COVID and flu, compared to 6.6 per 100,000 last week. So that's quite a sharp rise in 1 week. I wonder how unusual that is for the time of year, given how cold it is, particularly in the last week. But they're advising that you don't go near them. Now, I wonder whether, will this strike the fear that lots of people felt during the pandemic, so they'll follow it? Or will a lot of people look at this and say, well, Granny and Grandad survived COVID, so as if I'm not going to go, now we've all had our vaccines or whatever.
Do you think people will listen to this?
I kind of hope they don't. And that goes against how I usually feel about these things. But I just think that, having a moderate cough or a cold is within the reason of leading your life. And actually, I think about, my own...
I guess, do you think you should tell a grandparent, I'm feeling a little bit unwell, do you still want to see me?
I mean, yes, that might be basic respect, though, because to be honest, any of us, if you have a friend coming over and they haven't mentioned that they're spluttering everywhere, you might have appreciated that.
We do talk about viruses and illnesses so differently post the pandemic than we did before.
No, I mean, it's true. But look, I personally think that if you have a cough, really, not seeing your grandparent at Christmas, it seems like a pretty waste of a time.
And do you think, Morgan, that this is reminiscent of the COVID nudge unit sort of attempt to... that they're saying don't do it because they're trying to get to change our behaviour, but... are people not a bit tired of being told how to live their lives now by the state?
Yeah, I think it could be a few things. I think it could be that this is, the new normal, so to speak, where we're going to be seeing a lot more messaging about public health, or it's just that we notice it more because we went through COVID. Like, I can't tell you if these messages were in the papers before COVID, because I probably just thought, all right, it's just a cold. So it's possible that's kind of a self-reinforcing thing where we're noticing it more. But yeah, I think we're to the point now where people understand best practices for being ill at Christmas and are willing to just, use some common sense and say, look, I'm not feeling well, but let's still see each other.
Can I ask something that doesn't make sense to me? In The Sun, page 3, the Christmas song that is #1 for health.
Yeah,
Mariah Carey, why?
This is Mariah Carey's hit, All I Want for Christmas Is You. And you hear it everywhere at Christmas. It comes out every year. She makes millions in royalties. But there's a new study that says that it actually can lower your blood pressure.
Oh.
So listening to the song, which I know it can drive most people crazy, actually has positive health effects and lowers your blood pressure.
Wow. Are you surprised?
Yeah, it drives me mad, that song.
It's a little bit annoying.
I love it.
I mean, it's a good song, but you hear it so much that now when I go on my Christmas playlists, I skip it straight away.
Oh, there we go. Sorry,
I'm just
Mariah.
sick of it.
No Mariah fans behind the desk here.
She makes millions a year just from the royalties of that one song. I think it was #1 in the UK about 2 weeks ago. Doubtless it will be, and the chart comes out later today, because it always
We've got a guest on that, actually, to find out who is in the running for Christmas #1. Very quickly, let's just squeeze it in. We've got a lovely story in the Mirror about a lady called Hilary.
Yes, Hilary Manist, a 93-year-old from somewhere, I can't remember where, Derbyshire. Yeah. And she goes out and gives biscuits to the binman every year because she has mobility issues. She has done for a long time. And it's just a sweet story about how she says thank you and the binman saying that it means the world that they can help. And so I think, you know, there are lots of people out there that will be having a hard time in the next couple of days for various reasons. And those small acts of kindness, I think we shouldn't forget them when there's lots of big issues, that these little things can go a long way.
I always tip my bin men. I always have. I give a bin man a £5 if I see him at Christmas. I just always have.
Do you?
I do, yeah.
Really?
I've always
Are you up that early?
Yeah, when do you see your bin men?
Well, they're quite late rise. They get about 9-ish around where I live. But I always give them a £5. And my postman, Chinese lad.
But I'm even surprised you have cash to hand with you at the time that you see them.
I always make sure I've got the £5. I just always have done it.
Right, there we go.
Yeah.
Benjamin, Morgan, thank you very much. They'll join us again in about 40 minutes' time to rifle through the papers once more. In the meantime, it's coming up to 10 minutes to 8. Let's bring you up to date with the main stories today.
An extra 1.5 million free school meals have been served in primary schools across Wales since September, feeding a further 45,000 children. Year 1 and 2 pupils are now also starting to benefit from the scheme as part of a £260 million investment from the Welsh Government.
Well, the UK government says it will invest £654 million in preventing homelessness over the next 2 years. It says those funds will protect tens of thousands of vulnerable people from losing their homes, providing temporary housing and support to avoid evictions.
Scotland's Health Secretary is meeting union leaders later in a bid to avoid NHS strikes. Humza Yousaf will hold talks after nurses in Scotland rejected the latest pay offer, which would have seen their wages rise by an average of 7.5%.
Charity shops in the UK have experienced their biggest ever sales week as shoppers search for cheaper gifts amid the rising cost of living. Well, that's according to the British Heart Foundation. They say a third of Britons are adjusting their spending limit due to rising bills. Bernardo's, Age UK, Cancer Research UK have also reported a rise in revenue over this festive period. I'm really enjoying this overview of who is working today, so keep your views coming in. Elizabeth says they're always forgotten. Social workers are working understaffed, overworked, underpaid, damned if they do and damned if they don't, but they always struggle on. Thank you for that message. And Nick has said, just to say, all those in retail, we've been talking about how busy it's going to be in the shops today. They're working particularly hard, especially food retail. They're into the biggest days of the year. It's also only hours away from the stupidity of some people to rear their ugly head. Why hasn't my turkey defrosted when bought it on Christmas Eve? Or why haven't you got any pickles left when they've been on big displays for 3 months?
This is the unsung heroes who are putting in a hard shift today.
How many of us are that underprepared?
Yeah.
You can't be buying a frozen turkey on Christmas Eve.
Well, if you do, then you might be going to A&E for salmonella. So, I mean, really...
Or get a really small one.
Yeah. Seriously, you know it's Christmas. Plan ahead.
Keep your views coming in. And let's talk about food at Christmas. There is a new festive food trend that's becoming this year's must-have table centrepiece. Edible wreaths.
This came as a surprise to me, but actually looking into it, they look really tasty. Food writer Julia Crouch joins me now. So what's so special about this new trend and how can people get involved?
Hello. So I just think it's a really lovely way to bring some extra Christmas sparkle to your dinner table. They look so beautiful, but they're so easy to assemble. We're very used to having wreaths on our doors, but now we can have them on our dinner table as well. So I think that's just really lovely.
And so what are the sort of typical ways of making them? How do you do it? So is it something, you don't hang it on your door and people go, no, Christmas Carol, people come and gnaw away at it, do they? It's like something you put on a table, right?
That might be a bit tricky, although, you'd be feeding all the squirrels and pets outside. But no, so it's basically a way to have a nice centerpiece. And the way you do it is you can use anything really. So you could do a charcuterie wreath. And the way you would do that is to create the ring design is you just put a bowl or a little plate in the middle. You get your big serving board or your big plate and you just assemble a ring round the edge. So you could do a cheese board in that way. You could do a lovely winter salad, or you could do sweet things too. So you could do profiteroles in a ring with chocolate sauce. Another lovely tip is if you're doing charcuterie, for example, you can use cocktail sticks and kind of thread your chosen cured meat onto it with, say, little tomatoes, artichokes, little peppers, and then place them all round in a ring. And they just look so cute and your guests can come and pick them up and nibble at them. I just think they look so nice for how simple they are to prepare.
I mean, the ones we've been looking at look absolutely beautiful here, sweet and the savoury. I hate to bring up this, but the sharing platter sort of very much fell out of fashion, didn't it, over the last 2 years? Because the idea of us all sharing the same thing and touching it, that really changed how we ate at Christmas. Do you think it's now back in season, the sharing platter?
Oh, absolutely. I think, obviously with COVID, no one did that kind of thing for ages. And now that it's, really died down a lot, people just want to have that kind of celebratory food and everyone dig in and share. I think there's something so nice about sharing food, and it's kind of family style, isn't it? You could put it there on the table, everyone dig in, everyone help themselves. I think the sharing platter is absolutely back.
Now, if anybody out there is thinking, oh, this takes too much time, life's too short, there was one that I saw that even I could have a go at. It was a pork pie wreath. It was basically 8 pork pies in a circle with some pickle in the middle. Now, even I could do that, Rosie.
This is fantastic. Yes, pork pie is one of my favourite foods ever, so I'd absolutely support that. Easy peasy, yeah, go for it. Pork pie ring, perfect.
Very quickly, Julia, what's on your Christmas table when it comes to the big meal on the big day?
Oh, so we have so traditional. So obviously big turkey, bread sauce, all the trimmings, pigs in blankets, a lot of gravy, a serious amount. All the veg, sprouts, an absolute must. I love it. I think
it'd be better than the pictures we're just showing now. They don't look like a very good Christmas dinner. But Julia, thank you so much for speaking to us, food writer Julia Crouch, about the sharing wreath, which looks great. And I have to say, that looked slightly school dinnery, didn't it, that Christmas dinner?
It did, although I've said it before, say it again, there's no such thing as bad turkey. I just love turkey any way it comes.
Though.
I don't care, I love it. Turkey. And what Julie said there, her house, I'd like to go to her house.
It does sound good. Loads of you are getting in touch with who is working at this Christmas, and Colin has said Santa's just started his 1 shift a year.
Good point.
Probably quite busy, yes. Keep your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Lots more to come, including the latest on the race for Christmas #1. That's after the break.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. A wet and windy spell heading northwards through the day today. Most of Scotland will be dry until tonight. Mild again in the south, but chillier air continues further north. The mild but wet and windy spell, courtesy of this set of weather fronts slowly edging in. A soggy start across southwest England and Wales, and that rain drifting north now into the Midlands and southeast England too. A lot of spray, a lot of surface water on the roads, and a lot of traffic on the roads today, of course, as well. So just bear that in mind if you are hitting the roads. That wet spell will spread into northern England and Northern Ireland by lunchtime, and by the end of the day into parts of southern Scotland. A few showers in northern Scotland, some snow in Shetland, but most of Scotland dry but cold. Further south, it does turn a lot drier this afternoon, and it will be mild here as well, but it's also going to be blustery, accompanying this band of rain, some very gusty winds. Wet and windy weather spreads into southern Scotland this evening. As it hits the colder air, there will be some snow north of the central belt on some of the higher routes this evening, so again, bear that in mind if you are travelling. Further south, it'll be rain showers that we see coming in because the milder air continues to spread northward. Still pretty windy as well through the night, and that leads into a blustery Christmas Eve. There'll be rain showers across northern England and much of Northern Ireland, and outbreaks of rain and hill snow still in parts of northern Scotland. That'll continue through the day, but Shetland may well stay largely dry. For England and Wales, actually for many places, a bright, blustery Christmas Eve with some good spells of sunshine, but showers will come in at times on that gusty wind. Mild temperatures in double figures across the south and even further north. Temperatures a little higher tomorrow compared to today. So it's a mild start to the Christmas period. Christmas Day, mild for most of us with some rain, but turning colder from the northwest during Christmas Day and colder for all of us by Boxing Day.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dubry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dubry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Is it a border farce? Travellers arriving into the UK have been told to expect disruption as border force workers begin strikes.
Good morning and happy Christmas almost. It's 8 o'clock on Friday the 23rd of December. This is Breakfast on GB News with Rosie Wright on your final day. Happy to be alongside you and myself, Martin Dawdley. Here are your top stories this morning.
Millions are being warned of travel delays as border force staff begin 8 days of strike action over pay. With postal workers also walking out today and more rail chaos. A GB News survey reveals that more than half of us think nothing works in this country anymore.
Also this morning, ministers have threatened to veto Nicola Sturgeon's gender law after the SNP passed a bill that allows trans people to self-declare their gender.
Also in our poll, we asked voters what they think about the plan to move asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing, with some surprising results.
And it's traditionally the busiest shopping day of the year, and we'll be discussing all things Christmas as many of you prepare to hit the shops for some last-minute purchases, and that includes me on lastminute.com all the way.
Hopeless, Martin, hopeless. Now, you can join in any of our discussions, particularly this morning, after that poll that basically said 57% of us think Britain's not working. We're asking what is working. Loads of you are getting in touch. Andy, a very good morning, who says, Rosie, my son, who is an RAC patrolman, is still out there and working over Christmas, keeping motorists mobile. Thank you very much for that. Annette says, air traffic controllers, they're certainly working, yes, for sure.
Today, for sure, they'll be extra busy.
And Jan says bin men as well. Jan also gives her bin men presents at Christmas as well. So if you can think about who is working, maybe it's you or a loved one, then get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Well, more travel chaos as travellers arriving in the UK are being warned to expect delays as passport control workers begin strikes over pay and working conditions. The Border Force staff are the latest UK workers to go on strike in one of the busiest times of the year. Over 1,000 workers are set to walk out, affecting passport control desks at Birmingham, Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Cardiff and Glasgow airports, as well as the port of New Haven. Elsewhere, postal workers are set to stage another walkout today, while national rail strikes will resume from Christmas Eve.
So let's find out more. Let's go to our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, who's at Birmingham Airport for us this morning. Jack, so explain to us, what impact does the Border Force staff going on strike have on people, presumably arriving into the UK, having long delays getting through immigration?
So essentially, obviously, Border Force and Border Control are all about that, checking those passports when people are coming into the country. And so by them going on strike, it means there's less of those people processing people coming into the country, dealing with some cases, which of course can be quite complex, of people arriving into the country. And so what a lot of the airports are having to rely on today are the e-gates, the passport e-gates, where essentially arriving passengers kind of scan their passport electronically and can get through and arrive in the country a lot quicker. So a lot of what's going on today is basically depending on those e-gates working sustainably. Of course, 1,000 border control staff are on strike today up until the Boxing Day. They're not on strike on the 27th, but then they're on strike for the rest of the year until, of course, the 31st. And so what's essentially happened is civil servants, Ministry of Defence staff, and of course the Army have been brought in to try and make up those numbers at the airports like Heathrow, here in Birmingham, and other Docklands as well. So there is going to be some disruption if those e-gates don't work. A lot of the airports are saying that just give yourselves a bit more time, and then hopefully you shouldn't have as much disruption. They're trying to minimise that, of course. But over the course of these strikes, 9,000 flights are going to be coming into the UK. That's almost 2 million passengers trying to arrive in and go through passport control, which, of course, these strikes are naturally going to affect. And there's been some flights here arriving into Birmingham Airport already delayed, and it's starting to have a little bit of a domino effect on flights, of course, arriving a little bit later on. We know that GB News can exclusively reveal that from the Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who has found out that some, in terms of London, some short-haul flights and some transatlantic flights are having to take on more fuel in order to possibly cope with a holding pattern over the city. Of course, that in some cases it can add about £6,500 to the cost of fuel that that British Airways are putting into some of their flights. So we know that they are planning long-term for some more disruption. But of course, the ISU, which is one of the main border control unions, which represents a lot of those, didn't reach the 50% threshold of their members voting in their industrial action vote, and so they haven't gone on strike today. So it's only members of the of border control, about 1,000 from the PCS, the Public and Commercial Services Union, that are actually going on strike today. The Home Office are trying to say that they've mitigated the risk there, and airports are trying to say that we don't think there's going to be delays that are going to badly affect customers. But of course, before those coming in, if those e-gates aren't working, that's the issue that some airports could face today, which could cause delays as people getting to the country coming for Christmas.
Jack, thank you so much. I'm sorry the weather is so torrid for you at the airport. Someone who's not jetting off to somewhere sunny and wonderful, but standing there for us, giving us the latest. Really appreciate your time this morning.
It definitely deserves a cup of tea there. I mean, it's getting lighter, but it's getting wetter, and you need a better umbrella. Anyway, let's bring travel expert Sally Gettin into the conversation. Good morning, Sally. So, in broad terms, what does this strike mean for people arriving into Britain today?
So it means a big load of trouble for people arriving into the UK, because this problem at border control will impact them more than people who are departing out of the airports. So
this is more if you've got international friends and family coming to visit, they might get snarled up.
Yeah, they definitely could. And you know, the worst scenario is that people are stuck on the planes at the gates, not able to disembark, or worse, that it's backed up in the air or indeed from the departing airport overseas before they actually leave and take off to arrive back into the UK, because the airport and aviation network is an interconnecting one, and it's very delicately balanced.
And presumably it could be that those arrival halls are just at capacity, so no one else will be allowed in until they've been cleared.
Yeah, they need to be cleared, because obviously you cannot have overcrowding and congestion, especially like we saw in the summer, and also bags could get backed up as well.
Interesting point that Jack mentioned there. Mark White got the exclusive line about the extra fuel that's being taken on board, because of course if planes can't land, they have to taxi around and circle, and that's burning millions of pounds worth of extra fuel. 40 tonnes of fuel it takes to get across the Atlantic, but it's about 25% more. That cost, will that get passed on to the consumer? And what about the environmental impact of all this circling around in the sky above London?
OK, so the other question, it will eventually get passed on to the consumer. In fact, airfares definitely are going to rise over the next year due to lots of issues, the cost of fuel, for example, and airlines cannot bear the brunt of that. Also, airports putting their fees up. And in terms of the environmental impact, this is a great cause for concern. The aviation industry is really throwing everything it can at cleaner fuels. But of course, this is a very sudden problem for airlines, and they've also had to reduce their schedules in advance to deal with the border control issue. So they're going to lose a lot of money over this, cancelled flights and extra fuel burn, like you say. So it's really a big negative storm for them.
Yeah. Let's move on from what's happening in the air and look instead on what's happening on the roads and the rails. That's not a very straightforward picture either, is it?
No, because on the ground we have also another big storm brewing. Obviously, we have the rail strikes, and they're continuing to rumble on and impact. But also on the roads, the highways agency staff are also on strike too. And, you know, the big surge in capacity on the roads is going to test that road network system as well.
And Sally, you mentioned to me before we came on air, you've heard about another strike coming at the airports. What's that and how that affects passengers?
So this will impact Heathrow in particular. A ground handling company called Menzies is planning to strike. They're going to ballot their members. They haven't done so yet. It was supposed to be before Christmas, and now it's planned for the end of the year, between the 29th and the 31st of December. And this will affect all operations, both departures and arrivals, bags, for example, the aircraft itself, all that turnaround that happens to service the aircraft. So that's going to put pressure on Heathrow at a critical time.
Are you travelling over Christmas?
Well, you know what? Yeah, I'm weighing it up myself as well. I'm looking at the new year as probably the best bet. But I think passengers should expect disruption even going into the new year as well. Because
a travel expert who doesn't travel at Christmas, you could make it up, couldn't you?
Sally, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time this morning. There's been a lot of what's not working. But we're asking this morning what is working at Christmas. Loads of you getting in touch. Morning to Duncan says, farmers, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, work stops for nothing on a farm. Thank you very much for your message. And a very good morning to Vince in Aberdeen, who says, we as letting agents continue to work and work hard, especially up here in Scotland, where the legislation is a lot stricter than it is in the rest of the UK. Ongoing maintenance issues, people moving in and out, certainly keeps us on our toes.
I've got to say, Rosie, I'm loving your one-woman crusade to make these strikes a good news story. Well done.
Well, I just think it's time. End of the week, lots of people will be at work, and instead of just hearing about all the people who've decided today not to go to work, you may have great sympathy for the strikers. Good to remember those who are today.
So you're right, here.
GBviews at gbnews.uk. Let's bring you up to date, though, with the other headlines today.
And motorists are being warned, as we just heard, to expect long delays as millions hit the road to spend Christmas with family and friends. The AA says today will be the busiest day of all, with an estimated 16.9 million journeys being made across the UK. Congestion could also be increased tomorrow due to a strike by thousands of RMT members working at Network Rail, which will last until the 27th of December.
Inquests opened today in Maidstone into the deaths of 4 migrants who died whilst trying to cross the English Channel. Their boat capsized early this month, sparking a major rescue operation off the Kent coast. Another 39 people were brought safely to shore.
And the Chancellor is being urged to scrap VAT charge on defibrillators. The SNP says removing this tax makes it easier and cheaper to build an effective network of the devices across the country, as well as saving lives.
Unison's urging the Welsh Government to negotiate over health workers' pay to avoid industrial action next year. The trade union's written an open letter to the First Minister Mark Drakeford saying nurses and ambulance workers are exhausted and support future walkouts.
Well, the UK government could move in to block Scottish gender reforms. It comes after the Scottish Parliament approved a new bill making it easier and quicker for people to legally change their gender. The bill removes the need for a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria and lowers the age of applicants from 18 to 16. It will also reduce the time a person must live as their acquired gender from 2 years to just 3 months before it is legally recognised. But this has prompted a clash with the UK government, who have concerns over safety for women and children.
Let's find out more, particularly the political implications of it. In the studio with us now is political correspondent Tom Harwood. Tom, just explain to us how the legislation's changed in Scotland. And this now, a decision for Westminster to say, do we intervene or not? Very complicated.
Yes, this is about who gets to decide whether someone is legally recognised as transitioning from one gender to the other. Up until now, this was a medical process, a process with several stages and quite a lengthy and indeed costly process for people. Now, these reforms that have taken place in Scotland or have been voted on, not yet received royal assent, and we'll get to that later. But these that have been voted on in Scotland now make that a more streamlined process, take the medical issue out of it and say that the person who ultimately gets to sort of make the decision in terms of who they are is the person concerned. This is the law in Ireland as it stands. It's the law in Belgium as it stands. But there are lots of countries, of course, where it isn't. Indeed, the Conservative government was pursuing this sort of reform in 2017, but was dropped after a consultation. So this is where Scotland and England and Wales and Northern Ireland are diverging. And that is the issue that the UK government has. They believe that there may well be a clash between the legal rights as respected and implemented in Scotland versus the rest of the UK. And there's some concern in government that this new gender recognition law in Scotland may be sort of at loggerheads with the Equality Act 2010 in Westminster. And that means that late last night, after the Scottish Parliament voted for this law, the Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack started talking about what's called a Section 35 order. It's a bit complicated. It's part of the Scotland Act, the settlement of devolution within the United Kingdom. But it basically means if the United Kingdom government see that there is harm from a piece of legislation in the Scottish Parliament, that it might clash against UK legislation, then this order could prevent royal assent. Now, they've got about 4 weeks to decide whether or not to carry that forward.
Now, there were cries of shame on you as this was voted through. It certainly feels like the appetite is there in Westminster to take this on. Is this a battle worth fighting, philosophically, politically, or is it more than that? Is this about stopping Scotland devolving power, and this is a war that Westminster must fight?
So there's two unionist differing points of view on this. Now, it must be said that there are, in terms of those who voted for the law in Scotland, and there's been a lot of debate in this in Scotland, it ended up being that the Lib Dems and most Scottish Labour MSPs and most SNP MPs backed it, so it passed by a large majority in the Scottish Parliament.
Yeah.
Now, the trouble is, for some unionists in the United Kingdom, having this sort of battle shows the benefits of the union, that they can sort of clip the wings of Nicola Sturgeon. For other unionists, they see that actually this could put rocket boosters under the Scottish nationalist cause. Of course, it's not been long since that court order that say that the Scottish Parliament doesn't have the right to call an independence referendum whenever they want to, that they need Westminster's consent for that. And if Westminster were to pursue a Section 35 order striking down this Scottish legislation, that would be the first time in history such an order has ever been used. So there are some unionists who think that this would undermine the unionist cause because it would be sort of saying that we don't really respect the devolved settlement of Holyrood as an institution. And so there is this conversation going on, no doubt at the top of government, over this Christmas period, because, of course, royal assent is not due to take place until January. So they do have this time to sort of discuss this, to think what is the best way through here, and there are strong arguments on either side.
Tom Holt, that's fantastic. Thank you. Speak to you in a bit.
We'll have more on that in the next hour. Those of you getting in touch with who's working today, Britain apparently not working, according to our poll, which we'll look at as well. Julie says, no one's mentioned them yet. Are milkmen still delivering milk to the door?
Yes, they are. They still go down my road.
They're very definitely still working. Christopher says, I'm an electrical mechanical engineer. I have to get into work on Christmas morning to check machinery. That's, of course, very important, very vital. Thank you for doing that. And Andalee as well says, don't forget all those who work with animals in horse racing. This is one of their busiest times. In farms, zoos, petting farms, animal shelters, and, of course, vets. GBNews at gbnews.uk.
This is Rosie's army of people who are working today. It's a positive, beautiful moment.
I know, well, I have a confession to make, actually, in terms of working. Today is my last day at GB News, so I won't be working tomorrow. Well, it's Christmas Eve. Are you going to be here?
I'm not here tomorrow. I'm travelling back today if I can get my train ticket to work.
I think Patrick and Ellie are taking the helm, actually, for the Christmas weekend, so do stay with GB News. In the meantime, after the break here, we're going to be hitting the shops with our reporter Will Hollis ahead of, and Martin's part of this, at the last-minute Christmas rush to get those presents.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and myself and Rosie.
Now, are you ready for Christmas? Martin's not. He isn't.
I'm almost.
It's making me feel a bit stressed, to be honest. Plenty of us aren't. Today is predicted to be the busiest shopping day before Christmas.
Well, our reporter Will Hollis joins us now from Melton Mowbray, home of a great Christmas export, the pork pie. Tell us, how busy can it get and what can we expect from it?
Good morning. Yes, well, I was fortunate enough to get all my shopping done a couple of weeks ago, which means I can be out here in Melton Mowbray reporting on what everybody else is shopping for. And in Melton Mowbray, of course, the currency really is Stilton cheese. And as you said there, pork pies. But of course, at this time right now, we've got a cost of living crisis and inflation is really being driven by the cost of food. It's up to around 10.7%. But at Christmas, lots of people from all around the regions and even sometimes from around the country come to places like Melton Mowbray specifically for those items. Matthew, you're from the Melton Mowbray Food Partnership. Just explain to me, how important is the local currency here, pork pies and Stilton cheese, particularly around Christmas?
They really are important items. People come to Melton specifically for Melton Mowbray pork pies and Stilton cheese, and then of course they buy other things here, so it helps the general economy. Food tourism with pork pies and Stilton cheese is worth £100 million a year to the Melton economy, so it's really, really important.
And then how big of a tradition is it? How does it fit into this Christmas tradition where people seem to want to eat a lot of pork pies, particularly for breakfast, I think?
Yes, for a Christmas breakfast, everybody in Leicestershire and surrounding areas eats a Melton Mowbray pork pie on that breakfast morning. It's a really essential part of Christmas, and of course Stilton cheese follows every good Christmas dinner.
And then right now, I just said it, inflation is really high, 10%. We've also got lots of different concerns where people are worried about where their money is going to go. Does that mean that quality items like pork pies and like Stilton, which really are the thing that keeps this place ticking, does that mean that they're going to be gone from many people's Christmas lists, particularly today?
Certainly not. People like a treat for Christmas period as well. But also, if you only got a little bit of money, you want to spend it on quality and not on some rubbish and be disappointed afterwards. And that's why people will go for the Melt Moby pork pie and the Stilton cheese.
Food prices are going up, but also the amount of money that people spend on food is going up. Do you think that people are going to maybe consider spending more money on Stilton cheese and less on the fritty things like nuts and maybe crisps?
The Stilton cheese is the essential of a Christmas, as is the Melt Moby pork pie. You've got to have those items, and then you'll spend whatever left is on the little treats as well. But those two items are really important and central to a Christmas.
And we're going to see lots of men probably at this point in December going around doing their shopping, maybe getting deodorant and that sort of thing. You're from Melton, or have at least lived here for a while. How busy does this get as maybe a provincial town, not in Nottingham, not in Leicester, kind of on the border?
We find actually that prior to Christmas and the weeks before Christmas, it's the ladies doing their shopping. But as it comes towards Christmas, the proportion of men sort of scurrying around looking for those last-minute presents does increase significantly. This is the capital of a large rural hinterland, and we do get a lot of visitors coming and locals coming for their last-minute Christmas shopping.
Matthew, thank you very much. We have been speaking to the British Retail Consortium. They said in a statement that food price rises have been the main driving force behind this year's overall inflation figures, so consumers face a more expensive Christmas food shop. They added to me that while, of course, last year we had Omicron, while this year we've got strikes, and you might feel that you're spending a lot of money, or at least still the same amount of money, but you're certainly going to get less bang for your buck this Christmas.
Well, thank you very much for that. Thank you. I've got to say, pork pies, I used to work in a pork pie factory, and you think that might put you off, but I tell you what, I love pork pies. And Melton Mowbray pork pies are the best on the planet. Get out and buy one, there's still time.
Do you know, I totally believe you, because earlier we were talking about these Christmas wreath food platters, and Martin said he'd make one that just made out of pork pie.
8 pork pies and a jar of chutney. I mean, even I can do that.
Right, now what does, moving from food to music, so Cliff Richard and Mr Blobby, what have they got in common? They've both been #1 in the charts at Christmas time. So who is going to take the top spot this year? Could be Lad Baby for the 5th time.
Well, we're joined by the most excellent showbiz reporter, Steph Tachi, who can take us through the runners and the riders. So who's up there without mentioning the swear words?
No swear words. Yep. So Lad Baby, over the past 4 years, they've been #1. And talking about pork pies, they've always been #1 with sausage roll themed tracks. But this year they're doing something different. It's the first time ever Band-Aid has been allowed to have a refix, and they're going to be releasing a single called Food Aids, which is looking likely to be #1. So they're raising money for the Trussell Trust and also Band-Aid. It's helping people who need to go to food banks this Christmas, and obviously it's social media influencers Mark Hoyle and his wife Roxanne. I think we have a clip actually to play.
Let's come together for Food Aid. This Christmas time, the nation's skint and they're underpaid. The Christmas lights aren't flashing, 'cause people can't afford the bills. We all
And we've got a whole load of celebrity lookalikes who've taken part in their video if you're listening on the radio. But then one genuine celebrity, Martin Lewis features.
Yes, because obviously Martin Lewis has been great this year in terms of his money expert tips for the country. And, you know, this Christmas, over 14 million people are living below the poverty line. So a song like this will do quite well. And if Lad Baby do get that #1, they'll make history as being the first band, overtaking the Beatles, to have 5 consecutive Christmas #1s. But they've got stiff competition from
the Queen of
Christmas, Mariah Carey. So what we find at this time is all the old tracks tend to be going straight to #1. So All I Want for Christmas is potentially a strong contender for #1. And we have a bit of a flashback of that one as well.
I don't want a lot for Christmas. There is just one thing I need. I don't care about the presents underneath the Christmas tree. I just want you for
seriously, Steph, that's bringing me out in hives. Who hasn't got that song?
Oh, you know...
It's been out forever. It gets played forever for free on the radio. I mean...
what I found this year is like a lot of the 80s music have been really connecting with the youngsters.
Yeah.
So every year when Mariah Carey comes back with All I Want for Christmas, there's a new generation who learns about the song and they end up downloading it. But it's not only Mariah Carey, also Wham! Last Christmas, which is also obviously a festive favourite. When it came out in 1984, it lost the #1 spot to Band Aid. So hopefully this year it's hoping to be #1 and take over from Food Aid, hopefully. But we've got some controversial bands
and when you say controversial, that is a polite way. I mean, they are about as vulgar as you can be.
Yeah, I can't mention the name of this band or the name of their festive track, but they're very anti the Tories. Last year, they released a song about Boris Johnson, which actually made it #5. And this year, they could be coming #1 again with their anti-political message.
There you go. Rosie, you managed to get away on your final day without an Ofcom complaint there for bad language.
No, we definitely can't mention their name. But their appeal really is because they caught that controversy.
Yeah, definitely. And what's happened, you realise, you know, back in the day, it used to be about people physically going to buy records. But now you've got a lot of influencers out there and they can connect with their fan bases online and they're very happy to download their music. So that's why we're moving away from the traditional ones and getting some really controversial festive tracks.
Steph, thank you so much
Have
for
a good
coming in.
Christmas,
If you could
guys.
pick #1, who would you choose?
Oh, Wham! Last Christmas. It gets me every time.
Fair enough, you're a traditionalist.
We've been asking this morning. Martin stubbed it, which I think I really like. My sort of working army.
Rosie's army.
Who are going to work this morning. So keep your views coming in. Corinne says theatre is working, of course, on Christmas Eve and Boxing Day. Stephen says all seafarers are working to supply oil and gas rigs, bring food and goods into the UK. If they ever strike, they're replaced by cheaper convenience crew. And another message from Robert. The builders on the site opposite our home have started for the day and it's throwing it down with rain.
That's it. Come rain or come shine, building Britain, building better. Beautiful. Well done, lads.
Because we've got a poll, but we've got more on it a little bit later, that says 57% of us think Britain's broken.
Yeah.
So who's actually working? Get in touch, gbnews@gbnews.uk. More to come, though, after the break, including another flick through the stories in today's papers.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 25 minutes to 9. This is Breakfast with Martin and myself, Rosie. Time to go through the papers.
Yeah. OK, so here with us today is from the iNewspaper, Benjamin Butterworth, who bites quite hard on social media, but in person you've been lovely.
I am a delight.
You are. And Director of Ops at the Adam Smith Institute, Morgan Schondelmeyer. Did I say that right?
That's right, yeah.
Wow.
I thought we were going to have a gentle start to this paper review, Martin, but it appears maybe not.
You know, people, I don't know if you get this, people say to me, oh, you're much nicer in real life. And I think, well, I'm not trying to not be nice on telly or on Twitter. But
social media just makes things more antagonistic and we all kind of get them.
I think it depends on who's tweeting.
Yeah, well...
I don't think I've had a single argument on Twitter.
That's because you're lovely.
We're very different, aren't we?
We are.
That's fine. Maybe that's why it works.
Yeah.
Morgan, let's start with you if we can in the Daily Mail. Page 12. 42 Albanians have been flown home. Now, the paper says this is a migrant crackdown. Is it? How effective has it been?
So this is one of the first steps we're seeing after Rishi Sunak made his big declaration in Parliament that this is going to be one of his areas of focus. And this is 42 Albanians have been deported. 32 of them were convicted criminals, 6 were failed asylum seekers, and 4 more had other immigration offences.
Yeah.
So these are all people being deported. They've gone through the process. And it really just points to the room that there is in the migrant system to actually take care of some of the pressures that we're seeing within the confines of the law and allowing more room for genuine asylum seekers and people who are actually coming to this country to try to escape harms in their native country. So I think this is positive for the government. Hopefully more steps like this, where you are deporting people who have criminal offences, will bring down the heat on the migrant crisis that we're seeing, and hopefully we can find some more common ground.
Interesting how 42 have been sent home out of 11,241 who arrived illegally across the Channel this year. So a drop in the ocean, you would say, Benjamin?
Yeah, I mean, I find this whole Albania situation kind of extraordinary because other countries like Germany and most of the ones in Scandinavia have accepted 0 Albanian refugees. So it's not really a question about, I don't know, compassion or refugee status or all those other wider things. They're simply not eligible. They're not from a country of that nature. I mean, I've been to Albania and it is the most boring place I've been in my entire life. So I can imagine they'd want something interesting to do. But it amazes me that we're not able to tackle it more straightforwardly. And I remember before even this crisis emerged in the last 12 months, that for some time Albanian has been the #1 foreign nationality in British prisons. Because there is a very serious problem with organised crime that is, at least in London, dominated by Albanian gangs.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why you see such heavy involvement in organised crime with migrants is because the UK government doesn't allow migrants to work while their claims are processing. And if you're not allowed to work and you're only given £5 a day to survive, you're going to be driven into underground means of making money. And if those networks already exist, it's very easy for these people to join those networks and start being part of organised crime.
Are you saying then that if you cross illegally into the UK, you should be given a work visa?
No, not given a work visa. So people who are here and are asylum seekers, while their claims are processing, they're not allowed to earn any money for 12 months. So they're completely dependent on the state while their claims are processing. And these are people with legitimate claims. These aren't people who are crossing over illegally. These are people who are arriving through legal means but are still waiting for their claims to be processed. So one of the things that you could do is lower that time frame where people are allowed to work so that you integrate people into society faster and they don't become a burden on the state.
Or we could send more Albanians home. That's another way of dealing with it.
I'm happy for Albanians to come here, but as legitimate economic migrants. You know, my view is that we need more migrants at the moment because we have a shrinking working age population and an increasing pensionable population, and we can't afford that at the moment. You know, we can't afford all the costs we have because there aren't enough workers. So bring more Albanians here, but legitimately as economic migrants, not through routes that put themselves at risk and that make it much harder for us. Because actually a lot of people, once they get here, are becoming the victims of gangs and of the control that they have over them.
But they pay their way often via traffickers who are part of that organised gang. They know what they're getting into. I find this notion they're somehow coerced into criminality a little bit far-fetched.
I mean, there's clearly a serious problem. I remember being in Kosovo, a country I love and have been to many times. And the first time I went there, someone said to me, a local, he said, "I love Kosovo, but it's full of Albanian drug dealers." And I said, "Oh, it's just like London then. You know, it reminds me of home."
Let's move on, shall we? Front page of many of the papers today, we've got Kate Middleton paying a festive tribute to the Queen. When, where, how can we hear it?
So it airs on ITV on Saturday evening. And basically, Kate, Princess of Wales, now talked about the late Queen and the fact that, in her words, Christmas will feel very different this year. Yeah. She said that while it will feel very different, we can still remember the memories and the traditions that we shared. Take time to slow down and celebrate with family. I mean, you know, it's a sweet message. And I think it will be very odd for a lot of us to see this period, this point in the year, without Her Majesty as part of it. I think it will really drive home that she's gone, because I found myself in recent weeks in the Harry and Meghan debacle suddenly remembering that she's not here. You kind of forget it because it's so unimaginable.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but I still sing God Save the Queen when it comes on. It's just like an instinctive thing that happens, and I know I'm wrong, but actually it feels kind of nice.
Yeah, it is strange, but I mean, I'm really looking forward to 3 p.m. on Christmas Day when we get to see the first King's message. At least for most of us, it'll be the first King's message. And I think, you know, you can only assume that he will mention his late mother in that.
I'm sure she'll star.
Because we've only had Queen's speeches on television before, because the television wasn't around prior to her.
Of course,
it wasn't something that
she
they
oversaw
did.
such a period of incredible change.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the Times if we can, Morgan. And there's a story on page 5. Explain this for us. Some fans have sued a movie studio. Why?
Yeah, so this is happening in America. Where else would you have such frivolous lawsuits? But if you remember the 2019 movie Yesterday, the plot where...
I don't remember that at all.
It's a Beatles movie. The main character is the only person in the world that remembers the Beatles.
Oh, yes.
And so
he becomes like a star.
Exactly.
Yes. Yep.
So in the trailer, they had a different actress featuring. And she didn't make the final cut, but she features heavily in the trailer. And some fans of hers paid $3.99 to rent the movie. And upon finding out that she wasn't actually in the movie, is now suing the company for $5 million in damages.
$5 million?
The distress that incurred by not seeing their favourite actress.
Well, it was misadvertised to them.
That's what they're claiming, that the trailer was misleading.
On the one hand, it is a silly lawsuit. On the other hand, why did they use the wrong person in the trailer? I mean, Benjamin, it's an act of self-harm.
I mean, I would say they are deserving of $3.99 back, not $5 million. That seems like... you know, America is the land of the crazy lawsuit, and this seems to epitomise it for me.
Let's go to the Eye, if we can. Page 23, the Pope's Demons feature.
Yes, so the Pope has made his first of his Christmas messages, and this one is to the elite of the Catholic Church. And it interested me because he said that he spoke to them about avoiding elegant demons and the Catholics within the hierarchy of the Church that believe they know better than everyone else and can tell people how to live their lives. And it's sort of a Jesuit dressing down is how one person has referred to this speech. And I actually, you know, I'm not a Catholic and I'm never going to be, and I disagree profoundly with much of what the Catholic Church preaches. But I do think that there's something to be said for this Pope being very aware of the problems that it has, at least in the Western world, that it seemed to be dictating to people how to live their lives in a way that most of us don't identify with. And so I find this a rather refreshing message from Pope Francis.
And another refreshing message, Morgan, over to you in the Daily Star, of course, with all the important stories. And they're saying, say no to Dry January to help save the Great British Pub.
That's right. They're calling it the Booze It or Lose It campaign, and they encourage everyone to sign up to the Wet January pledge, which says that you will go to frequent your local during January. And this comes off the back of some research done by the British Beer and Pub Association that said that 86% of local pubs are considering shorter hours, closing early, or even just taking days off because they can't afford to keep their doors open with so little traffic and such high energy bills.
Are you going to be signing up?
I am never a dry January observer, so I will be sticking to my regular observance of January.
And do you mind me asking why not?
I just don't see the point.
Yeah,
January.
same here. And also, Benjamin, I find that that's when the pubs are nice and empty after the Christmas rush. Have a nice.
But do you get that a lot when you go in the pub? It comes nice and empty.
But January is
started badly.
We're getting on so well, weren't we? We were getting on well all morning.
There's no month I'd want to be sober less than January. It's miserable enough. You know, I need a glass of wine.
I've been trying really hard today to pull up the spirit. That's what I needed from both of you. Morgan, Benjamin, thank you so much for the final time coming on to review the papers. Have a happy Christmas.
You too.
And see you in the new year. Right now, it's 8:45. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories making headlines today.
And GB News can reveal that airlines are facing millions of pounds in extra fuel costs as they deal with the likelihood of long delays during the Border Force strike. GB News has seen an internal memo from British Airways advising its pilots to take an additional hour's worth of fuel to help jets cope with having to hold on for an extra hour in the skies taxiing over London.
An extra 1.5 million free school meals have been served in primary schools across Wales since September. That's feeding a further 45,000 children. Year 1 and 2 pupils are now also starting to benefit from a scheme as part of a £260 million investment from the Welsh Government.
And the government says it will invest £654 million into preventing homelessness over the next 2 years. It says those funds will protect tens of thousands of vulnerable people from losing their homes, providing temporary housing and support to avoid evictions.
Charity shops in the UK have experienced their biggest ever sales week as shoppers search for cheaper gifts amid the rising cost of living. Well, that's according to the British Heart Foundation. They say a third of us are adjusting spending to limit our bills. Well, Barnardo's Age UK and Cancer Research UK have also reported a rise in revenue over this Christmas period.
Well, as the year draws to a close, we're reflecting on those who have made a real difference in 2022, including mum of two, Kate Wilson, who has just won the hardest working Festive Feet competition for her dedication to her charity, Coventry Clothing.
Now, the award was set up by foot care brand Skull, and it's designed to honour someone who truly deserves to put their feet up this Christmas. So what does it mean to Kate to win? She joins us now from her home in Coventry. Kate, congratulations. It's always a bit awkward to be sort of celebrated for something that you were just doing anyway. But just explain, why did you win?
So I set up Clothing Coventry a year ago to try and support more people in Coventry in clothing poverty. And there's lots of people who work really hard at Christmas. I'm not sure if I am the hardest working Festive Feet, but I really appreciate winning and the hamper that Cheryl has sent me. And I'm just trying to help people. I just want to make a difference in my community.
Works. How do you then make sure that you get the donations and they go to the right people?
So we have a referral system on our website where anybody can just pop by and request clothes. It's like a click and collect system where people put in what clothes they need and then they can come by and get it. But we get lots of referrals from other charities and social services and things like that as well.
And what kind of change have you noticed this year during the cost of living crisis? What types of people are coming to you now that perhaps would not have done so before?
Well, last December, I helped 30 people with clothes parcels. And this December, I've helped 300. Wow. So just the level of need is huge. But we're seeing a lot more where it's just normal working families where the kid's coat has been lost or the zip's broke and they can't afford to replace it. So they're contacting me saying, have you got a coat for my child? And it's absolutely heartbreaking.
I think particularly being asked specifically to provide children's coats must really sort of stick in the throat a little bit. Just tell us one or two of the individuals that have received some of your donations.
Well, we have rails in the community where people can go and help themselves too. So a lot of our clothes do go out where to food hubs and places like that. But we've seen people in mother and baby homes and things like that. One particular guy I saw recently, name was Luke. He came in absolutely really struggling, couldn't afford Christmas. We managed to get into Christmas gifts as well. But his daughter had recently had an operation and couldn't be in the cold, but he couldn't afford to heat his home. So he was taking extra blankets and things to try and keep her warm, and was staying with friends and visiting friends all through the day so they didn't have to put the heating on at home. And it was just absolutely heartbreaking that he's just a normal working dad and just really wants to keep his kids warm.
And just got some information here. A friend of mine, Bev, in Nottingham, I hope she's watching. She's a chiropodist, and I asked her who has got really hard-working feet. And she said she has a hospital porter who walks 30,000 steps in a day in steel toe-cap shoes. People who work in hospitality, home carers who walk between homes, factory workers, and, of course, the unmissable postmen. So in terms of the impact on the community, it's a great thing to bring people together this time of year at Christmas, isn't it, what you're doing?
Yes, I'm just trying to help people.
I think what would be really great for us to know, you've been awarded this and you absolutely deserve it, is what can people in your community in Coventry but also further afield do to help support your work? Because this is a time we've just been hearing that charity shops are seeing a surge in revenue because people have got less income, so they're shopping differently, they've got less disposable income. How can people support you?
We always need donations of good quality, season-appropriate clothes, but especially things like socks and pants. We have to buy those new. We won't give them away secondhand. So we're always looking for funds to buy those or donations of new underwear for people. And I'd like to grow the charity. I'd like to offer more services. I'd like to give people more dignity of choice to choose their own clothes. But I don't have a warehouse big enough. So if anybody local has a nice big warehouse they'd like to give me for free, that'd be amazing.
You never know. You just never know who's watching or who's listening. Thank you so much. Katie Wilson speaking to us there, the founder of Coventry Clothing, who was then voted the hardest working festive feet. Well deserved. And maybe if you've got a little bit of warehouse space, you know our email, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Well, I mean, there could be a miracle at Christmas. I mean, who might be watching that? Who might just say, yeah, no, have this? I mean, this is the time of the year when people, I think, are feeling a bit more philanthropic, feeling a bit more charitable. They sort of want to reach out and help, so it would be amazing. And
good to talk about people who are working at Christmas, because we've done this poll at GB News that was a bit gloomy. Now, there is significant strike action, which is hampering travel. Maybe you've sent a whole lot of Christmas cards this year that just haven't turned up.
No
I got a whole batch yesterday, so those people might have been very well prepared.
So did I, actually.
But the question is, if 57% of us say Britain's broken, who is working? How and why? Certainly, Katie's been working. Mark, very good morning to you. He says, nobody thinks about the hard-working doctors without borders and selfless surgeons. That's a very good point. Margaret says, I'm working. What about the hundreds of thousands of people working in the third sector, the not-for-profit sector? So there we go, charity again. It's always about the public or private sector. Third sector staff often provide life-saving and caring services, yet are constantly working. Well, Margaret, thank you for getting in touch. And you mentioned there, we were talking about post office workers. Those who have been working are doing a significant number of steps a day.
That's right. And again, Rosie, I'm really admiring your determination here to keep this positive, because the thing is, you read so many bad front pages about everything's broken and nothing can be fixed, politicians are incompetent, but yet a quiet army, Rosie's army of people are working on and keeping this country ticking over. So thank you all this Christmas.
John has said, do you know how much hard work it is babysitting a 26-year-old son? Have a lovely Christmas and Happy New Year. Well, to you too as well, John. I'm not sure what your son will have to say about that. Maybe they say it's hard work living with you. Lots more to come on the programme after a short break. Don't miss it.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. A wet and windy spell heading northwards through the day today. Most of Scotland will be dry until tonight. Mild again in the south, but chillier air continues further north. The mild but wet and windy spell, courtesy of this set of weather fronts slowly edging in. A soggy start across southwest England and Wales, and that rain drifting north now into the Midlands and southeast England too. A lot of spray, a lot of surface water on the roads, and a lot of traffic on the roads today, of course, as well. So just bear that in mind if you are hitting the roads. That wet spell will spread into northern England and Northern Ireland by lunchtime, and by the end of the day into parts of southern Scotland. A few showers in northern Scotland, some snow in Shetland, but most of Scotland dry but cold. Further south, it does turn a lot drier this afternoon, and it will be mild here as well, but it's also going to be blustery, accompanying this band of rain. Some very gusty winds. Wet and windy weather spreads into southern Scotland this evening. As it hits the colder air, there will be some snow north of the central belt on some of the higher routes this evening, so again, bear that in mind if you are travelling. Further south, it'll be rain showers that we see coming in because the milder air continues to spread northward. Still pretty windy as well through the night. And that leads into a blustery Christmas Eve. There'll be rain showers across northern England and much of Northern Ireland, and outbreaks of rain and hill snow still in parts of northern Scotland. That'll continue through the day, but Shetland may well stay largely dry. For England and Wales, actually for many places, a bright, blustery Christmas Eve with some good spells of sunshine, but showers will come in at times on that gusty wind. Mild temperatures in double figures across the south and even further north. Temperatures a little higher tomorrow compared to today. So it's a mild start to the Christmas period. Christmas Day, mild for most of us with some rain, but turning colder from the northwest during Christmas Day and colder for all of us by Boxing Day.
Join me, Calvin Robinson, on Christmas Eve and Day to explore how this special period has become a source of hope with an especially festive show. Expect Christmas carols, nativity readings, and interviews with special guests. And it's all filmed in a church for that proper Christmas feeling. Christmas, a message of hope at 2 p.m. on Christmas Eve and 5 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Christmas Day. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's a border farce. Travellers arriving into the UK have been told to expect disruption as Border Force workers begin strikes today.
Well, a very good morning. It's 9 o'clock on Friday the 23rd of December. This is Breakfast on GB News this morning with Martin Daubney and me, Rosie Wright. Well, here are your top stories.
And millions are being warned of travel delays as Border Force staff begin 8 days of strike action over pay, with postal workers also walking out today and more rail chaos underway. A GB News survey reveals more than half of us think nothing works in this country anymore, although you've been keeping it very positive, Rosie.
GB News has also seen a leaked memo from aircraft carriers urging pilots to take on thousands of pounds worth of extra fuel as strikes on the ground lead to delays in the air.
And also this morning, ministers have threatened to veto Nicola Sturgeon's gender law after the SNP passed a bill that allows trans people to self-declare their gender.
In our People's Poll, we asked voters what they think about the plan to move asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing, with some surprising results.
And it's traditionally the busiest shopping day of the year, and we'll be counting down to the big day as many of you prepare to hit the shop for some last-minute purchases, including me.
Oh, Martin, it's no surprise that it's Christmas on Sunday. Lots of people still not prepared. You can join in any of our discussions. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Lots of you are getting in touch because that poll said, oh, Britain, nothing's working. The people who are working. A very good morning to Gaz from near Stoke-on-Trent. All the maintenance guys are going out in their vans from home to home doing repairs. They're working very hard. Well, a very good morning to you. Bob says all the staff at the Woking Sound Bear Hospice are working tirelessly. Morning to you. And Andrew says, please can we acknowledge we can do this with pleasure. All those foster carers on call 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, trying to make Christmas special for all of those in the care system.
And I've got one final one here. Angie says, why did everyone forget to mention lorry drivers? Well, you didn't. You mentioned lorry drivers earlier. Couriers, supermarkets, petrol stations, I could go on, would not be able to work without lorry drivers who sleep at the side of the road and have no facilities, but they keep this country going. Please say thank you to all the lorry drivers. Thank you, lorry drivers.
And anyone working. gbviews@gbnews.uk to add your voice to the conversation. Right, travellers arriving into the UK are being warned, expect delays. Passport control workers begin strikes today over pay and working conditions. The Border Force staff are the latest set now of UK workers to go on strike in what is one of the busiest times of the year.
Over 1,000 workers are set to walk out, affecting passport control desks at Birmingham, Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Cardiff and Glasgow airports, as well as the port of New Haven. And it's going to cost the airlines too. GB News has seen an internal leaked memo urging pilots to take on thousands of pounds worth of extra airline fuel, as planes are expected to spend more time circling airports.
Well, let's go live to an airport to find out what's happening. Our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson is in Birmingham for us this morning. Jack, it's still raining. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for being there for us. Tell us what's happening, because the real crux of this, it's not people leaving who are going to have problems today. It's people arriving and then the knock-on delays. What's happening?
Well, I'm battling the weather, and people arriving in the UK are going to be battling against this disruption that these border force strikes could well be causing in airports across the country. Of course, the main airport passport checks are when people arrive in the UK. Some of those cases can be quite complex, and which is why this disruption to the border force strikes is kind of happening today. We know that civil servants and Ministry of Defence personnel, as well as some of the army, are kind of have come into airports across the country to replace those workers that are on strike today, to try and keep things moving. But the main thing that people arriving in the UK are going to be finding is that there's going to be a big push from airports today to try and use the passport e-gates, essentially where you can electronically use your passport to get that passport checked and arrive and go through your check-in into the country a lot quicker. But those e-gates aren't available to everyone. Children under 12 especially can't use those gates with their passport. So border force officials are still very much needed here at airports across the country, and this is why these strikes could cause some disruption. There have been a few flights here which have been delayed, which, because of course, can always cause a bit of a domino and a knock-on effect throughout the day. So airports just warning passengers and people to give themselves a little bit more time because of the possible disruption. We know that the reason for these strikes is over pay, pensions and job security. The PCS, the Public and Commercial Services Union, that's the one that's on strike today, about 1,000 of their workers. We know that they want a 10% pay rise and also better pensions and job security, which is something that a lot of unions are also calling for as well, and their General Secretary saying that if the government came to the table, these strikes could end today. But we know that currently, so far, we're expecting disruption from now until Boxing Day and from the 28th until the 31st as well. So people arriving just to take a bit more time, with 9,000 flights coming into the UK while these strikes are on, nearly 2 million passengers. There is expected to be disruption, but that big push from airports today to use those e-gates if you are coming into the country.
Well, Jack, somebody who's put a shift in today certainly is you, from darkness to hanging on to your body there defiantly. Well done, mate. Thank you for joining us from Birmingham Airport, and I hope you go and have a nice winter warm after this. Thanks, mate. Merry Christmas.
Well, let's get more insight now. Bring in our National Industrial Relations Advisor, Nicholas Finney, OBE. A very good morning to you, Nicholas. This is just the latest in another series of strike action. What is at the crux of it here for Border Force staff?
Well, it's perhaps important to explain that there is another union, the ISO, that represents about 4,000 Border Patrol staff and Customs staff. They're not on strike. They actually took a ballot. I think they were quite close to deciding to go on strike, but in the end, they said, no, national security is far more important. We're not going to go on strike. And Lucy Morton, who's their sort of general secretary, has spent some time talking about the issue that they face. So for a start, we've got about 4,000 staff who are not on strike. The other thing is that in total, I think there are about 10,000 staff in border and customs control situations. Now, the PCS, which is the big sort of public sector union, has called out these 1,000 members, but that leaves another 5,000 who aren't on strike. And actually, if you look at all of the places where customs officials are located and Border Patrol, they are, they're all over the place in ports like Dover and Holyhead. So this is a deliberately targeted action by the PCS to cause the maximum disruption. It's causing disruption to incoming passengers in particular. And of course, really, it's a most terrible time to do it from the perspective of ordinary people.
Nicholas, how do you think this can move forward? I mean, the Royal College of Nursing are after 17.6%, seems excessive. There's been talk about 6% Border Force might settle for. Do you think that might move things forward?
Well, the problem here, I think, is that the government is in a very difficult position because it wants to, along with the Bank of England and all the other central banks in the world, get a grip on inflation. And they know that if they succumb to actually what are in the face of it quite reasonable demands to try and keep up people's living standards, but if they do succumb to it, then all they're really doing is adding a further spiral to inflation. What we had in the 1970s, wage push, price push, wage push, and that I think they're right to try and find a way through without forcing up wages. Now, I mean, it's interesting that in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon thought she'd solved the nurses' problem by breaking with the independent pay review and offering 7.5% to the nurses. But to her dismay, I think, the nurses have decided to go on strike anyway and have rejected that pay offer. So it's not going to be very easy to solve this. I guess that the governments will try and come forward with some kind of rapid recommendation for the independent pay review body to meet and to review its recommendations early. That might be a solution because the 4.5% pay offer was based on months and months ago. I think it's sort of March this year, and that clearly is now out of date.
Out of date. The real challenge now is this headache, this deadlock situation between the government and the unions, escalating and well on into the new year. Thank you, though, for your analysis. Relations advisor Nicholas Finney, OBE. Really appreciate your time. Right now, 10 minutes past 9.
Yeah, let's bring you up to date with all the stories now.
GB News can reveal that airlines are facing millions of pounds in extra fuel costs as they deal with the likelihood of long delays during the Border Force strike. GB News has seen an internal memo from British Airways advising its pilots to take on an additional hour's worth of fuel to help jets cope with having to hold for an extra hour in the skies over London.
And it's Christmas, so of course motorists are being warned to expect long delays as millions hit the road to spend Christmas with family and friends. The AA says today will be the busiest day of all, with an estimated 16.9 million journeys being made across the UK. Congestion could also be increased tomorrow due to a strike by thousands of RMT members working at Network Rail, which will last until the 27th of December.
Inquests opened today in Maidstone into the deaths of 4 migrants who died whilst trying to cross the English Channel. Their boat capsized earlier this month, sparked a major rescue operation off the Kent coast. Another 39 people were safely brought to shore.
And the Chancellor is being urged to scrap VAT charges on defibrillators. The SNP says removing the tax makes it easier and cheaper to build an effective network of the devices across the country, as well as saving lives.
Unison's urging the Welsh Government to negotiate over health workers' pay to avoid industrial action next year. The trade union's written an open letter to the First Minister Mark Drakeford saying nurses and ambulance workers are exhausted and support future walkouts. Right after the break, we're hitting the shops. Martin's going to be doing it later.
And tomorrow.
I just despair of the people who are still not ready for Christmas. Earlier, someone who works in retail, because we've been talking about who works, was talking about some of the customer complaints that people make in the supermarket today or tomorrow, saying things like, why is there no pickle? I want a turkey that isn't frozen. I mean, how do you get to this point and think, oh, it's the 20th, we've had Advent, it's the 25th on Sunday, I'm not ready. We'll find out how busy the shops might be with our reporter Will Hollis ahead of the last-minute Christmas rush after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back, and you're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Rosie, and it's your final 15 minutes.
I know, it is my last day at GB News. It's been a pleasure to be here this week on Breakfast. Strike action, unfortunately, has been one of the main top stories, but let's talk about some different stories because we commissioned some of our own research. And in the studio with us to talk us through it is our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Tom, a very good morning to you. Various topics covered.
Yes.
Let's start, if we can, on what the public thought about the government's attempt to move asylum seekers to Rwanda.
Yes, this has been a very contentious issue since it was first announced by the Prime Minister 2 Prime Ministers ago, if we can think back to the halcyon days of the second quarter of the year. Boris Johnson, of course, announced this Rwanda scheme where there would be offshore processing of people who arrived here in the United Kingdom, but not just processing, even if those claims were accepted, people would still stay in Rwanda. That's one of the key points of it. If anyone arrived illegally, they wouldn't come in the UK, even if their claim was legitimate. Now, the polling at the start of this announcement was always very mixed. There was never a clear majority in favour of the Rwanda scheme. The messaging around it was very mixed, and of course, it got bogged down in all those legal cases. The interesting thing that we've found in this research commissioned by GB News is that for I think there's been only one poll other than this one that has found a plurality of support for the scheme.
There's 40% approve, 29% oppose, 66% of leavers still support it, 56% of remainers oppose it. Now, are we surprised? See, I actually think that even leavers are going cold on this idea because they see how ineffective it's become because of the legal complaints against it, and there still could be 2 more rounds of legal cases against it. £140 million in, 0 deportation so far. Tom, has this scheme even got any legs?
Well, the government seems to want to provide it as a symbolic step, and it's always in the mind of the government been about sort of a deterrence more than a sort of way to deal with the 50,000 or so people who've come across. But it does seem that on the PR front of things, it's not quite there yet. Perhaps one of the reasons this poll has shown a bit more support than other polls is because this comes in the wake of the High Court ruling where, for once, the government's actually won in a court of law in this country. And perhaps that means that people are a little bit warmer to it now than they were in months previous. But we'll have to see where that court process goes in the future.
The other thing that was asked about was ranking the competence of the 3 prime ministers that we've had this year. Who came out on top?
Well, I think we should start at the bottom, no surprises. 3% of people say that Liz Truss was the most competent.
Who was that? Friends and family?
Friends and... Well, it's funny, there's... In polling, I'm going to get a bit cephalogical now. In polling, there's a term called the lizard man constant, which is around 3 or 4% of any poll where people pick the ridiculous answer, whether it's practical jokers or people who aren't all quite there. It's, for example, the percentage of UKIP voters who voted Remain, 4%. It's the percentage of Obama voters who believed he was the Antichrist.
Comes from.
So it's the lizard man constant. There's always noise in polls, is what I'm trying to say. The reason it's called the lizard man constant is it's the percentage of people who believe that lizards are running the world. But for a time, we had lizards running the UK at the very least. But... Anyway, 3%.
That was good.
So Boris Johnson comes out on top.
Boris Johnson comes out marginally on top. He is a few points ahead of Rishi Sunak. So it goes Liz, Rishi, Boris, but perhaps most crucially, on top of all of them is don't know.
Yes.
And perhaps that tells us more about the politics over the last year than anything else.
Finally, you've spent the last year teasing through what has been so politically turbulent times. 2023, a very difficult challenge for Rishi Sunak. Losing support, he's got massive, significant problems when it comes to strike action. How do you think he's faring?
It is remarkable to look back over the last 12 months. As we went into Christmas last year, the Tories and the Labour Party were level pegging in the polls. Boris Johnson was in a little bit of trouble, but no one could have thought that he would have been out within the year. The way that the polls have turned in the last 12 months alone has been unpredictable and extraordinary. And, of course, other things that occurred within this year as well, the war in Ukraine, the deepening of the cost of living crisis, all of this. And that's only in the last 12 months. The next general election is 18 months away at the earliest. Now, if that much has happened in the last 12 months, it would be an absolute fool's game to try and predict what happens in the next 12. Things could turn on a penny. And we've seen the Labour Party really become ascendant in the last couple of months. That could turn around again. That's all to play for in terms of how many more months we have to go in the run-up to what will be a very, very unpredictable general election.
Superb insight. And I must say, your segue from lizards to Lizzies, that was world-class.
Tom, thank you very much.
Cheers, mate.
Tom will be back here in about 10 minutes' time with the briefing. But for now, are you Christmas ready? It seems plenty of us are not. Not me, but Martin. Today is predicted to be the busiest shopping day before Christmas.
Well, our reporter Will Hollis joins us now from Melton Mowbray, the home of the pork pie. So it's a massive day there. How's it going? How's it looking out there?
Well, if this rain keeps up, it's probably not going to be too busy here in Melton Mowbray. One place that certainly is quite busy is behind me in the... Yeah, one place that is quite busy is the pork pie shop. There's going to be a massive queue outside of there because, of course, Melton Mowbray is famed for pork pies as well as Stilton. But, of course, big problem at the moment for everyone, no matter where you are in the country, is inflation, 10%, and food really is the driving force behind that. We've also heard how much more expensive turkeys have been getting in the recent weeks. Now, the British Retail Consortium has said in a statement that food price rises have been the main driver driving force behind this year's overall inflation figures, so consumers face a more expensive Christmas food shop. As well, earlier I was speaking to Matthew O'Callaghan, who is from the Melton Mowbray Food Partnership, and he was telling me just how important pork pies and Stilton are to Melton Mowbray and how inflation shouldn't be too much of a worry this year.
Like a treat for Christmas period as well, but also if you only got a little bit of money, you want to spend it on quality and not on some rubbish and be disappointed afterwards, and that's why people will go for the Melton Mowbray pork pie and the Stilton cheese.
Food prices are going up, but also the amount of money that people spend on food is going up. Do you think that people are going to maybe consider spending more money on Stilton cheese and less on the fritty things like nuts and maybe crisps?
The Stilton cheese is the essential of a Christmas, as is the Melton Mowbray pork pie. You've got to have those items, and then you'll spend whatever left is on the little treats as well. But those two items are really important and central to a Christmas.
Yes, well, it's not just food items. Of course, the money that people spend on alcohol at Christmas is going up, as well as 80% more money is spent on books. Being a capital for food, lots of people are going to be drawn to Melton Mowbray because of food, but they're also going to be out in the shops. But if this rain doesn't stop, I'm sure lots of people will be going to maybe bigger retail parks and shopping centres instead of high streets like this one.
Will, thank you so much. Will Hollis there, our reporter in Melton Mowbray for us this morning. Well, what about for retailers? Many of them still struggling to recover from the pandemic. Jeremy Baker is a retail analyst who joins us live now. Jeremy, we've been hearing actually there's been a boom in people buying in charity shops. What's happening this Christmas to retailers? They're desperately going to need people to buy today and tomorrow.
Well, you mentioned charity shops. The big story of this year is the normalisation of the bottom end of the market. You've got your luxury market, your mid-market, Marks and Spencer, and low income, and now we've got the low income market, and that's become completely normal. Food banks, everyone going there. It's a kind of from a retail point of view, it's completely fascinating to see how they've done it, and they've created their own industry. From a political point of view, it certainly explains why the country is almost ungovernable, because the gaps between the rich, middle, poor and the very poor are now so large. And I think, to me, retail explains that. In the retail world, you can see Britain more clearly than you can, say, in political debate. You can see the struggle at the bottom, the real terrible struggle at the bottom, and the elite level, the luxury, where, with £10,000 watch and all of that is the norm. And how they could possibly understand what's life at the bottom, it just couldn't happen. And that's the political nightmare. But from a retail point of view, it's been kind of a fascinating year. If you look at, say, Marks versus Waitrose, they really battled it out, and it develops quality. The Marks and Waitrose experience is so lovely, so beautiful, so sensitive.
I'm so sorry, Jeremy, for time. I'm really sorry we have to leave it there. Retail analyst, thank you so much for your contribution to the programme this morning. That's it from us. It's it from me on GB News. Thank you so much to everyone who's sort of tuned in over the last 18 months or so. It's been a pleasure. Thanks from me and Martin. Don't go anywhere, though. Tom Harwood will be here with the briefing up next.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television,